What's up, everybody? Welcome in. Middays, 97.5 The Fanatic. Bill Colarulo. I got Andrew DeCecco with me for all 4 hours today. What's up, Andrew?
What's going on, Bill? Excited for the show.
I'm excited for the show as well. And before we get started, I got to give a big shout-out to my man behind the glass, Ray Dunn, celebrating his 2-year anniversary at The Fanatic today. Happy anniversary, man.
Hey, thanks. I appreciate it. Glad to be here.
2 years. Well, we're happy to have you, and I'm very happy. Monday, we launch a brand new show with Mike Missinelli, Ray Dunn behind the glass. Well-deserved, Ray. 2 amazing years at The Fanatic. I haven't been there as long. But all my time here, definitely enjoyed working with Ray, and I enjoy working with Andrew. And we got a lot to get into today. Thanks for joining us. What's up to our YouTube family, as always. Let's start with the Fightin' Phils. We're going to do a lot of Eagles talk today, obviously. We're not going to dive into the article again. We talked about it at length yesterday, what happened with Hurts and Sirianni. We are going to talk about Hurts and Sirianni, though, in a little bit different of a light today. But first, I want to start with the Philadelphia Phillies, because a monster win last night on so many levels with this Phillies team. They now take the series against the Dodgers. All is well, thanks to Kyle Schwarber, who goes 4 for 4 last night. 3 home runs, 7 RBIs. The most RBIs by a Philly since Carlos Ruiz way back in May of 2012.
Wow.
And the last time a Philly had 3 home runs and 7 RBIs, Jason Worth in May of 2008. Worth is winning horse races now, for God's sake. So a great night by Kyle Schwarber. And we'll talk about the ramifications. But what I want to bring up first, you saw something last night. If you stayed up late and watched that game, you saw something last night that you don't see often anymore. And that's retaliating. So Nick Castellanos steps up to the plate in the 8th inning. And for whatever reason, Michael Grove decides to throw a fastball high and inside, hits Casty. Casty's not happy. He uses some choice words and says, hey, that's a pretty bad miss, dog. Maybe threw another word in there we can't say on the air. But then in the bottom of the 8th, Matt Strahm, a guy that I don't look at as a tough guy necessarily, gets up to the mound and he retaliates by hitting Gavin Lux. You don't see a lot of retaliation anymore in Major League Baseball. And the first question I want to throw out there to you, Andrew, and to you, Ray, and to all our listeners is, how do we feel about retaliating in Major League Baseball? I'm all for it. I am all for it. As long as you're not headhunting, don't throw a fastball at a guy's head. But it's the same reason why I like fighting in hockey. Let the players govern themselves. Let the players protect each other. I know that sounds crazy, saying how are you protecting each other with a fight, or how are you protecting each other by throwing at someone? It's because if a player knows they have to answer for something that they've done, I love the retaliation in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, me too. You don't see it a lot in today's game, as you mentioned, but I think taking up for your teammates goes a long way. When you're a team as connected as the Phillies are, you kind of expect that. You're going to have to account for what you did. And I'm all for the retaliation. I think it's something that's sort of refreshing, especially when you look at the landscape of today's major leagues.
Yeah, Ray, what's your take on retaliating in baseball? We saw it last night. It was interesting because, first of all, I couldn't figure out why they threw at Castellanos. I mean, outside of the fact the guy's been hot, didn't understand why they threw at him. It wasn't like he did anything, didn't taunt anybody, didn't run into second base too hard with his cleats up or anything like that. They throw at Casty, and then Strahm says, no problem. I'm going to come right back at you in the bottom of the 8th.
Yeah, Castellanos after the game mentioned he didn't think it was intentional, and that kind of leads me to, I'm not really a huge fan of the retaliation. I'll be honest. I think I'm in a severe minority of people who watch baseball of like, yeah, it's the tough guy moment, very hold me back-ish when it comes to the retaliation. Like,
hold me back.
Yeah, baseball guys, a lot of the bench clearing brawls or a lot of the chirping is done, behind the fence, and then when you start to get out in front of each other, it's like, oh, who's going first? Let me talk to you. Let me talk right in your face. Yeah, you're not going to do anything. I'm not going to do anything. You're not going to do anything. The retaliation for me, I'm not a huge fan of it just because I don't like putting a guy on base. I don't like giving the other team opportunities to do something. Like, their goal is to get the guy to cross home plate. You're putting him one base closer to doing that. I get you're putting up for your teammate. And in the case of last night, Matt Strom's going so good when he did it. I was like, I know what you just did right there. I usually don't sign off on it, but I know you're going so good that I don't really get concerned about you allowing a run here and this coming back to haunt you. But I do, when it comes to retaliation, I always get worried of like, yeah, you got the juices flowing for your team. The other team also just watched you hit one of their guys in retaliation. If I'm going up to the plate, the first thing I want to do is knock one over the fence and make a one pitch turn into a 2-run home run and a swing in the game and start to get some energy on the other side. So I have never been a huge fan of the retaliation just for the reason of, hey, yeah, the goal is to get to home plate and you put a guy closer to doing so.
Yeah, I guess I have to clarify what I mean by it, though. Look, I understand where Ray's coming from. You don't want to put a man on base, especially in a tight game or a close game. I hate when pitchers throw at somebody because they celebrated too much on a home run or because they celebrated too much on an RBI. I firmly believe that, and I think Major League Baseball has gotten a lot better with this. Let the guys celebrate.
Yeah.
You look at Major League Baseball, one of the things they do worse than any of the other 4 major sports, even hockey does it better, at creating superstars and marketing their superstars. Look at basketball. Nobody does it better than the NBA as far as marketing their stars, selling their stars on an international level. Baseball doesn't do a good enough job with it, and I think that can be helped by letting these guys celebrate. Let them celebrate. Don't throw at them simply because a guy spiked his bat like Rhys Hoskins did a couple years back. And I think they've gotten away from that. So I don't like the retaliation there. But if a guy's going to run in the second a little bit too hard, go out of his way, and if it's a part of the game, that's fine. But do it in an attempt to injure.
With the spikes up, yeah.
Yeah, that type of stuff, you're going to have to answer for it. It's just like in the NHL. I don't like when there's a clean hit and somebody wants to fight, but someone takes a run at one of your teammates in the NHL, I love that they're going to have to answer for it. They're going to have to drop their gloves. Let the guys police themselves.
No, I agree, and I think it sends a message that you're going to have to answer for it. And I think sometimes you talked about why Castellanos, why did they throw at him? Sometimes, if you're the pitcher, you think that you can get away with something like that. You think that if you throw at somebody that's not going to do anything or retaliate, that you can kind of set the tone. You send a message, but it actually backfired, and I think it very much will rally the Phillies moving forward here in a critical series with the Diamondbacks.
So we're already having people weigh in on this, Andrew, and this is kind of to Ray's point about the hold me back. On Twitter, 76ers1 says, I think taking a weapon and throwing it at someone is fake tough. The batter should then pick up the ball and throw it back at the pitcher. I hate the fake tough stuff. So you're going to have people like that, but then we already have YouTube checking in saying, I love it. I actually just watched the old school Phillies-Braves Paul Bird-Eddie Perez fight this morning.
Paul Bird.
And we got our man Ricky Bo here who threw at Barry Bonds, and then Barry Bonds charged the mound. So that wasn't fake tough right there either. Barry and Ricky got into it, man.
Have you listened back to the call of that?
I actually did recently.
Yeah, because it was just the anniversary of it I think last week.
Harry Callis saying, basically, if there's anyone in that bullpen that's going to do it, it's good old Ricky Bo. I forget the exact line. I think it's in the system because I've pulled it before. The call of it is just hysterical because he's just basically saying, like, yep, there was nobody that's crazy enough here except that guy to go after Barry Bonds.
Ricky Bo, that's our guy.
Ricky Bo, my man. Well, we were talking about a battle between the shows, and because we always go at each other in the shows. I'm like, I don't want any part of Ricky, though. Ricky Bo, man.
No, he'll give you some chin music.
Yeah.
You don't want to mess with Ricky.
Ricky Bo. But we're going to throw that question out to everybody today because if you stayed up late last night, it probably woke you up. You peeked up from your bed as you're laying there watching the game when Casty takes it high and inside, and then Strom comes back the next inning and throws at the Dodgers player, Gavin Lux. So we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts about retaliating in Major League Baseball? 610-632-0975. Send us a text if it's easier for you. Give Ray your name so we can give you credit for it on the air. But people already want to check in on this. So we're going to go to Greg from Bethlehem. What's up, Greg? You're on The Fanatic.
Hey, guys. Retaliation is part of the game. I think it was more meaningful when the pitchers used to have to hit.
You're correct. When the pitchers did have to hit, because now they knew they were coming up the plate and they may have to answer for it.
Well, exactly. Now the pitchers pretty much insulated. I mean, their guys aren't. Somebody's going to get hit, but the pitcher's not worried about getting hit anymore.
Yeah, really good point by Greg, because the pitchers don't have to worry about anything. You talk about being fake tough. You get to hide behind the DH now, Ray. You don't have to worry about going up there. But we're going to continue that conversation throughout the show. In fact, Ray, why don't we put up a Twitter poll? Is it up already?
It is, yeah.
What do we got on the Twitter poll on this?
So today we're asking the question, obviously, in lieu of what we're talking about with retaliation. In last night's Phillies game, it appeared Matt Strahm retaliated for Castellanos being hit by throwing at Dodgers hitter Gavin Lux. What is your position on retaliating in baseball? Two options: love it or hate it. And so far, the early returns, a lot of people love it. 92% of people saying they love it.
Nice.
Wow.
8% saying they hate it.
Now, I wonder if we would do this Twitter poll in another city outside of Philadelphia. Like, if we were in the Midwest, probably would come in the other way. They're like, no, just let the guys play.
Twins fans? Like,
yeah. Just let him play. Philly's like, yeah, throw it at his head. Throw it at him. Well, look, we'll continue that conversation throughout the show. We'll check back in on the Twitter poll. But huge win for the Fightin' Phils on so many levels. They now take the season series against the Dodgers 5-1, Andrew DeCecco. And you look at the standings now, and all of the things that we were concerned about last week, and we all had different levels of concern, but even the people who were saying they weren't concerned at all, you had to have a little bit of anxiety when you started to look at those standings and seeing the Braves creep up a little bit. But now the Fightin' Phils, 7.5 games up on the Braves in the National League East. And even in the National League as a whole, they're 2.5 back up on the Dodgers. So you're feeling a lot better this morning, aren't you?
Yeah, they took care of business for sure. And I know, obviously, it's a long season. And sometimes folks tend to view the baseball season as if every game is like a regular season game in the NFL. But it's a marathon. I think sometimes when you're so effective throughout the season and you're dominating, you get bored. And sometimes you need that adversity, that little to hit the reset button and get you back on track. And they're facing a Diamondbacks team that's won 4 in a row, I believe. So they're going to really have to be prepared for it. But I think based on the momentum that they have, they should be able to take care of business.
Yeah, Arizona's won 4 in a row, 8-2 in their last 10. Let's hope. Look, Harper looks a little bit better, but he's still struggling. Turner's got to come back to being Trey Turner. JT Realmuto's got to figure it out as well. But I want to remind everybody who's listening, today at 12 o'clock is our next online ticket raid for FanFest. That's right, 97.5 The Fanatic FanFest 2024 with FanDuel is Saturday, September 28th at Xfinity Live. It's getting close. You can get your tickets today during our online ticket raid, 12 o'clock noon at 975thefanatic.com. At 12 noon. It'll go quickly, so make sure you're there at 12. This is the biggest party of the year for Philly sports fans. All of the Fanatic hosts, celebrity guests, Philly sports legends, activities, games, prizes, a lot more. 975thefanatic.com has all the info. Ray, I'm assuming the new midday show will be there, right? I'm assuming Mikey Miss will be in the house.
Absolutely. We're going to have a good time out there at FanFest. I'm excited for you guys to experience it. This is like a new position for me here, being the one in the room that's been to FanFest more than anyone right now. Like,
never been there.
So I'm excited for you guys to both get to experience it, because now I have like kind of the elder statesman viewpoint on it.
I was already picking Ray's brain on it, and he was painting a pretty eventful picture. So I'm really looking forward to it. Bill and I, obviously, it's our first time, and John was telling me about it. So it'll be here. It's coming up quick, September 28th.
Yeah, it should be fun. So if you want to be there, make sure at 12 o'clock, go to 975thefanatic.com today for our online ticket rate. And we're going to continue to talk about the Fightin' Phils. It was a big night, but I do want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the Eagles, because obviously, Andrew, unless you were under a rock, everybody knows now about the article that came out written by Tim McManus and Jeremy Fowler. We had Jeremy Fowler on the midday show yesterday. Best show ever had Tim McManus on. And nothing in there was necessarily revolutionary. Everybody knew Hurts and Sirianni weren't seeing eye to eye last year. We went over it ad nauseum yesterday about everything that happened, and Hurts didn't have faith in Sirianni's offense, and Sirianni went up and told the team during spring workouts he was taking full accountability for what occurred. But from all accounts, it does appear like they have moved forward. They've diagnosed the issues. They've addressed the issues. They've brought in Kellen Moore to be the sole voice on the offensive side of the football. They brought in Vic Fangio to be the sole voice on the defensive side of the football. So the big question then is, well, can they coexist? That was the word of the day on the best show ever yesterday. Can they coexist to succeed this year? And I think a majority of people assumed, yes, they're going to be okay because winning cures all. The problem, though, is, Andrew, as good as things may be when they're winning and as good as things may be right now during training camp, well, what happens when adversity hits? That's going to be the big question. What happens when things aren't going great? How do Sirianni and Hurts handle those choppy waters?
Well, they've obviously patched things up well enough to have Sirianni return. So I think that there's obviously both the head coach and the player are totally different people. Jalen Hurts is more reserved. Nick Sirianni is more demonstrative. He wears his emotions on his sleeve. So, right, Jalen tends to internalize things, and when you do that, you close people off, and you're not being able to communicate and sort of convey your thoughts and opinions. But I think knowing where they were coming from, and now they're able to kind of mend things. You don't have to be best friends. They're not going to be, but you can certainly coexist. And I think adding someone like Kellen Moore into the equation as the offensive coordinator, who you mentioned is going to be the sole voice, and he's going to be the bridge between the two, is certainly going to help rather than them having to deal with each other directly. But until there's adversity that hits, and there will be, and every season it's inevitable, you won't really know where that relationship is. But I think right now in August, everything's going great. They're riding around in Dom's cart, and because there hasn't been any meaningful games played yet. But we'll find out soon enough what that means.
And Tim McManus, who was the co-author of the article, you heard from Jeremy Fowler if you were listening to Middays yesterday. We had him on. But Tim McManus came on the best show ever later on in the day, and he talked about that very thing, about what happens when adversity hits. Listen to Tim McManus.
You know, everything right now doesn't have a hyper-tense feel to it. It's training camp. They haven't lost a game yet. Optimism is out there that they've turned the page and they're looking forward. But we know the way that the NFL works, and we particularly know how it works in Philly. Losses come, heat comes with it. Does everybody sort of stay in their lane? Does the relationship between the quarterback and the head coach hold up? And these are key things that we're not going to know the full answer to, honestly, until we get to that point. And whether Sirianni maintains the CEO role and allows Hurts and Moore to operate freely is something that we're going to be monitoring as we go through it. I mean, my sense right now is he probably understands, like, that's the best setup. So I think it'll hold. We're not going to know that for sure until the rubber meets the road here.
So that was Tim McManus on the best show ever yesterday. Does a great job covering the Eagles for ESPN. Joins the best show ever at least once a week, so make sure you tune in for that. So a lot in there, Andrew. Let's first start with Nick Sirianni remaining as a CEO-type coach. I don't see that being a problem this year. I know last year, and this wasn't the first report where we've heard Sirianni trying to take control of the offense. You've talked about it before. Brian Johnson wasn't really able to spread his wings and implement his style of offense. But I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that Sirianni, right or wrong, didn't have trust in a guy who'd never been an offensive coordinator before and had never called plays before at the NFL level. Again, right or wrong. I don't think he's going to do that with a guy like Kellen Moore, who has a proven track record of success.
Right, and let's look at Brian Johnson, right? Because Brian Johnson, remember, the Eagles played into mid-February, where a lot of the coaching candidates, the more prominent ones, were already off the board. So you end up promoting Brian Johnson, and you don't really have a full offseason to install everything that you want to do as it is. And I think if you're Nick Sirianni and you're coming off that Super Bowl season, and your chest is out a little bit because you're You know that your offense was among the NFL's best. You were just in the Super Bowl. Your quarterback was the best player on the field. So you feel like, I have a good handle on things. We're good. The way that I'm doing things is the right way to go. So naturally, you're going to be a little bit more heavy-handed in the offense. But when you have someone like Kellen Moore coming in who is experienced, and you know how the season went last year, I think if you're Nick Sirianni, you're more than okay with letting him take the reins.
And to your point about that, about Sirianni looking at it and saying, hey, we just went to the Super Bowl. We had a great offense. One of the sources in the report that came out yesterday from McManus and Jeremy Fowler does say Jalen doesn't give Nick enough credit. A lot of what we do well does stem from Nick. So although you could look at the report yesterday and take a lot from, well, Jalen Hurts doesn't trust Nick Sirianni's X's and O's, and he didn't know who to go to, and he ended up calling Martindale, which I want to talk about coming up as well with you. But there's also the other side of this, which is saying, hey, Jalen didn't give enough credit to Nick. This offense was very successful because of Nick, but want to continue to talk about this, and we're doing it in a different way. I don't want everyone out there to think, are you really rehashing the whole Sirianni-Hurts thing? What I want to do is I think everyone would agree they're in a good place right now. But when adversity hits, how are they going to handle it? So what I want to do with Andrew and Ray today is I want to take a look forward. We're getting pretty close to the 2024 season kicking off Friday night, Green Bay Packers, less than a month away. I want to look at that schedule and see where could adversity hit. Where is it most likely that we're going to get answers to this new relationship, this new corporate structure that they have down at the NovaCare complex, and is it going to be able to survive these certain aspects of the 24 schedule? We're going to do all of that coming up next. the call to come out and throw Barry Bonds, juiced up Barry Bonds. But the reason we played that clip, Ray found it way back in the archives, is because last night, if you went to sleep, Nick Castellanos takes a fastball high and inside in the 8th inning, wasn't happy about it, and then surprisingly, Matt Strahm comes on the mound in the bottom of the 8th and does something you don't see often in Major League Baseball anymore. He retaliates by throwing at Gavin Lux. So we started the show throwing out that question. How do you feel about retaliating in Major League Baseball? See, I'm okay with it as long as you're not throwing at somebody's head. Don't throw at the knees. Get him maybe right in the thigh or, maybe the ribs, I guess. But look,
not the head, not the head.
But I don't like it. I don't like it when it's a retaliation for a guy celebrating. That's ridiculous. Let these guys celebrate. It's 2024. We're not in 1920 anymore. They should be able to celebrate. You want to expand the game of Major League Baseball? You want to make it more exciting? Let them celebrate. Look, the NFL does it now. Yes, you can't taunt. You can't point at a guy. You can't show up a guy in the NFL. But they let them celebrate in the end zone.
They're getting a little bit stricter with that. So, but I'm with you. You got to be able to enjoy the sport that you're playing and have fun with have fun with it.
Yeah, and this fun 10 o'clock hour on The Fanatic is brought to you by Window Nation. Take advantage of Window Nation's 50% off sale on all style windows. Plus, make no down payment with no payments and no interest for 12 full months. Call 866-90-NATION or visit windownation.com. But send us a text on the retaliation conversation. You could also go vote at 97.5 The Fanatic on our Twitter poll. How do you feel about retaliating in Major League Baseball? But I want to talk about the Eagles because that article dropped yesterday. We went over it a lot. All the shows did. If you didn't have a chance to read it, you should. It's 10 pages. We didn't learn much that we didn't already know, but this did reinforce some things that Sirianni and Hurts weren't seeing eye to eye. But McManus, who joined the show, best show ever yesterday, Jeremy Fowler, who joined us on middays yesterday, they both did talk about, though, that they're in a good place right now. They've moved forward. I played a clip right before the break, Tim McManus talking about how everything's fine. Sirianni's taking that CEO role, but as long as that lasts, everything's going to be just fine. And that's what I want to talk about now, because what happens, Andrew DeCecco, when adversity hits? Because when you look at the 2024 schedule, we're going to do a deep dive into where adversity could hit. There's a lot of opportunities for adversity. And I think we should start with the most obvious one. It's week 1. Look, this fan base, as excited as we all are right now, everything's great coming out of training camp. Jalen Hurts looks great in practice. The offense looks good. The defense is going to be better. If they go into Brazil against the Green Bay Packers, which is a team they are probably going to be fighting for with playoff positioning come January, and they lay an egg, I think adversity is going to be at an all-time high right away after only 1 week in the National Football League.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's where finger-pointing could potentially come into play. That's where skepticism with the new coaching staff and player and buy-in, all those different things could be at play, but that's where you're really going to be able to gauge the strength of that locker room, the chemistry, the leadership, should adversity arise. Because I'm with you, Bill. Early in the season, if there is to be a rough patch for the Eagles, that's where I would expect it, playing in Brazil. And then you come home and you play Monday Night Football against the Atlanta Falcons, and then you go on the road for 2 NFC South opponents in the Saints and the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers have had the Eagles' number of late, and the Saints are going to play you tough as well. So if you get off to let's say a rough start, a rocky patch there, that will really put a strain and put it to the test.
I thought Kevin Cooney snuck in here for a second talking about those first 4 games there, Andrew, because, me and Kevin have battled on this. Kevin Cooney thinks, and hopefully Kevin's listening, love Kevin Cooney, but him and I disagree about Nick Sirianni in these first 4 games. Kevin thinks that if the first 4 games don't go very well for the Eagles and they look close to as bad or worse to what they look like at the end of last season, that there's a chance the Eagles could make a move at the bye. I firmly believe, and I'm hoping we don't find out because I don't think things will be that bad the first 4 weeks, but I firmly believe that no matter how bad things are in the first 4 games of this season, that there would be no chance in hell that Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman would move on from Nick Sirianni that early in a season. Because that would be them admitting that they made a mistake, which I don't think they would want to do, admitting that they made a mistake, and also not giving this team any opportunity to gel or come together with a lot of changes.
There's no chance that they would move off a coach 4 games into the season, especially when, like you mentioned, that's exactly where I was going. You're not allowing the team to gel, to hit their stride, to grow. You're sort of just dismissing the coach, and then what? And then what's the answer? You're writing the season off as a loss. I don't think that given the investments that you made, Saquon Barkley, you look across the roster, like this is a team that firmly believes that they're going to be in contention for a Super Bowl, and I don't think that at the first sign of adversity, all of a sudden your coach is going to be on the hot seat. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
So we have some people checking in on our YouTube chat, Andrew. My man MBD BDBF. Can you imagine the Chiefs front office telling Andy Reid that Kellen Moore is going to run the Chiefs offense and he has to take a CEO role? It's laughable. See,
Andy Reid and Nick Sirianni are not the same.
Exactly. Here's my problem with that. You are comparing Nick Sirianni to literally one of, if not he's getting up there, the greatest NFL coach of all time. The better question, MBD, would be, could you imagine them telling Mike Tomlin that? Yes, I could. Could you imagine them telling John Harbaugh that? Yes, I could. Could you imagine them telling Dan Campbell that? Yes, I could. You can't compare Nick Sirianni to Andy Reid. CEO coaches have been successful in this league, and I think it can work. You saw in 2022, it worked. It worked when Shane Steichen was running the offense and Jonathan Gannon was running the defense. That team dominated everybody and was a half a football away from beating Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. So I'm not going to go there and say because Andy Reid wouldn't be asked to be a CEO that means it's laughable that Nick Sirianni is. I think this dynamic can work, and that's not me being a homer. That's not me being overly positive. It's because we've seen it work in other organizations in the past, and you saw some semblance of this 2 years ago, and it worked at a very high level.
Yeah, several successful organizations have implemented that. And I think it's actually going to be a good thing because if you really look at the season in a vacuum, Bill, the Eagles' 2023 season seemed to me like Nick Sirianni was overwhelmed. He was trying to do too many things. And when you try to focus on too many things, you're not able to fixate on just one thing. You accomplish nothing. When you're able to take that 30,000-foot view and really get a broad perspective of the roster, what position groups are doing what, and you're able to make sure that the morale and the everyone's being accountable, you're able to really fine-tune all those different elements that you really pride yourself on. I think that's ultimately going to be a good thing and help the Eagles in the long run.
Now, to be fair to our YouTube chat, MBD wants to make it clear. What he was saying was that Sirianni was hired to be an offensive coach and that they stripped him of the authority. That it's different than the CEO coaches who are actually hired to be CEO coaches. And that's why it's an embarrassment because you brought Sirianni in thinking he was an offensive mind. That is true. They did bring in Sirianni. They thought he was going to be a play caller. He was terrible at it. One of the worst play callers I've ever seen if you go back 3 years ago. But what I don't understand, though, to that point would be then people can't change, coaches can't evolve, players can't evolve. And if you go back 2 seasons ago when they did have success, Sirianni was brought in as a play caller. Well, he wasn't calling plays in 2022. Should they have fired him before the 2022 season?
What about Mike Tomlin? Mike Tomlin was a phenomenal defensive mind with the Vikings. He's a
Great
CEO
point.
coach. You know what I mean? Like, there are a lot of examples that you can really point to support what we've been saying.
Now, I will give MBD credit. He's correct. The reason they hired Sirianni was not necessarily to be a CEO coach. But as you grow and you start to learn yourself and you start to see what can be successful, I think this dynamic can be very successful because it will be similar And you're down there, Andrew. Andrew's been at the NovaCare Complex every day for training camp. You covered that 2022 team. You covered last year's team. Sirianni did give a lot of responsibility to Shane Steichen in 2022, but he wasn't able to do that for whatever reason in 23 because he just didn't have the same trust level in Brian Johnson.
And you're not able to really build that rapport when you're sort of thrust into a role. They had to fill that offensive coordinator spot pretty quickly, and you're not really able to build that rapport and synergy between coaches. So I think if you're Nick Sirianni and you're coming off that Super Bowl season, you're really confident that your system works and you know what you need to keep in there, you know what you need to take out. So you're not really going to be as keen on listening to outside voices. And then so when adversity does hit, you feel like you can kind of power through it. I have a way to scheme myself out of it, when in reality, you need to be able to tap into your resources. That's why they're here.
Yeah, you do. Ray, look, you haven't been as high on Sirianni for a while now.
Me? Not big on Sirianni?
No, you're not big on Sirianni. Actually, I'm going to throw this question out there now, Ray, before you answer this one. So I was reading an article yesterday. I don't know if people have seen what's going on in outer space right now, okay? There are 2 astronauts who are stuck in outer space. They went up. It was supposed to be for a week. They've now been there for 60 days orbiting the Earth, and they don't think they're going to be able to get them down until 2025. These 2 people are stuck in this small little spacecraft, orbiting the Earth for probably another 6 months after it was only supposed to be a week. So I had started thinking last night as I'm reading this article, and I wanted to ask Ray this question. If you were stuck in outer space, knowing what we know now, because we have a very good glimpse into who Nick Sirianni is, his personality. We know Jalen Hurts' lack of personality, if you want to put it that way. If you had to be stuck in outer space for 6 months with Nick Sirianni or Jalen Hurts, Ray, who would you rather be stuck with in that small little confined compartment?
I saw this on the sheet, and I was really hoping that, at some point this would not get back to me. Because goodness gracious, the choice I would have to make here is so brutal. Because either I'm getting Sirianni, who sees something go wrong, and he's trying to we can figure this out. I got this. And he's going to be hyper. I think he's just going to be hyper that entire time. And then there's Jalen Hurts.
You're going to get the polar opposite.
And I'm going to get, if the main thing's getting back to earth, that's the main thing. That's what we got to focus on. And that's what we're going to be locked into. I guess I'm probably going Hurts, because I think about 5 Mount Union stories into being stuck up there with Nick Sirianni, I think it would get ugly. I don't think I would be pretty happy. So I would probably go Hurts, but it would be it would take a lot for me to be stuck up there with one of the 2 of them.
6 months. So send us a text on that. If you had to be stuck in space like these 2 poor astronauts, look, we're praying for them. Hopefully they get home a lot sooner than that. But if you had to be stuck in space, would you rather be there with Nick Sirianni or Jalen Hurts, man? That's a tough one. But I do also want to continue the adversity conversation. But you can get in 610-632-0975. Andrew and I just went through where adversity could hit, and we talked about at the very beginning of the season and how is this team and this coaching staff going to handle it. But I want to look deeper into that schedule because there's a stretch of the schedule, Andrew, where I look at it, and I don't want to call it a gauntlet because it's not as bad as last year, but it's certainly not easy. We get into all that coming up next. Colarulo along with Andrew DeCecco today. Ray Dunn behind the glass here on Middays. Big win for the Fighting Phils last night. Kyle Schwarber explodes. 3 home runs, 7 RBIs, goes 4 for 4. Most RBIs since Carlos Ruiz way back in 2012. Last Philly to go 3 home runs and 7 RBIs, Jason Worth in 2008. Maybe that's a good sign, Ray. 2008, you know what happened that year.
Did something happen that year?
Andrew, do you remember what happened in 2008?
Was it a World Series win?
I think it was a World Series championship. I'll tell you, I remember being down there. I had never seen a championship ever in the city of Philadelphia because I was born after 1983's NBA Finals. How old are you, Andrew?
35.
So you never saw one either. That was your first one.
Yeah.
And Ray, that was your first one. You just happened to be 3 when it happened.
2, but thank you. I appreciate that.
And that was actually such a cool one for me because you grew up watching Jimmy Rollins, Chase Utley, Ryan Howard.
Wait, Ray, how old were you really back in 2008?
8.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, no.
But so we're waiting. I mean, the place was at a fever pitch the first night. And then you remember it gets rained out. We had to come back 2 nights later. It was ridiculous. Like, you're waiting. I remember we're counting down the outs because the Phillies take that lead early in that game, and then it rains. And you knew Major League Baseball because the rule was they had played enough innings. If it got rained out with the Phillies having the lead, they would have just been crowned the champs. It was like they were waiting for the game to get tied. The moment it gets tied, they call it. It's like, we got to come back another night. It was like typical. We haven't seen a championship since '83. We got to come back another night. Maybe that's an omen. But big night for the Fightin' Phils. And we're also talking about the Eagles today because we're looking at that article from yesterday, all the reports about Sirianni and Hurts, and we're moving forward. We're not going to rehash everything that was in that report. A lot of it you already knew anyway. Hurts and Sirianni weren't seeing eye to eye on a lot of things. But our concern is, as good as things are now, as great as things are between Hurts and Sirianni and all of the positivity that's coming out of training camp, that can change very quickly when adversity hits in the regular season. And I think adversity may hit week 1 in Brazil. I'm actually not – I picked them to win the game. I have the Eagles winning week 1. But I'm not going to overreact, Andrew, if they lose that football game. You got a new offensive coordinator, a new defensive coordinator. You got Jalen Hurts not only learning a new offense, he's picking up blitz protections now, along with a brand new center in Cam Jurgens. And then you look at the Green Bay Packers, Matt LaFleur's still there. Jordan Love is still there. All of their offensive weapons are still there, and they've added Josh Jacobs to the running back room. The one positive for the Eagles, though, as you look at that Green Bay Packers game, brand new defensive coordinator, Jeff Hafley. Coming in from Boston College, never been a DC at the NFL level before. That's maybe the one advantage for the Eagles is that the Packers are also learning a new defense. But I just do get concerned that Green Bay pretty much returns everybody on offense, and now they get to go against this brand new defense of Vic Fangio and all this personnel.
Right. If there is to be turbulence, I think it would be week 1. That's what it's really shaping up to look like when you talk about the continuity that the Green Bay Packers have offensively. Defensively, there's some new components there, right? You talk about the defensive coordinator, Jeff Hafley. You talk about Xavier McKinney, the big free agent signing for them at safety. And they drafted Edge Cooper, the linebacker, who I know a lot of Eagles fans were really high on out of Texas A&M.
I liked him.
So they have a lot of new pieces that are trying to really immerse themselves in a new defense. So, but when you take into account the Eagles having the new offensive coordinator, the new defensive coordinator, a lot of young players on the back end, right? The Green Bay Packers have a lot of receivers that have been playing together for a while, and also big-bodied receivers that can give you problems in the red zone. I think these are all different storylines to monitor as we move forward.
Yeah, it's a good point you mentioned about some of the new pieces on defense. I'll tell you, as much as I like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, and I'm happy the Eagles brought him back, Xavier McKinney was my guy. I mean, I wanted Xavier McKinney. He was my top choice on the free agent market when it came to safety, and the Green Bay Packers swooped in and got him. We'll see. Look, a big question mark going into this season, in addition to how is Jalen Hurts going to play. for me is the whole Jordan Love conversation. A lot of people are ready to anoint him as the next best thing. Yes, he looked good last year. It was 8 games. We literally saw it for a half a season. Jalen Hurts did it for an entire 2022 season, and all you hear about him is, well, it was only 1 year. Well, Jordan Love only did it for half a year. Let's see how he does when defenses adjust and do all those types of things. But that's the question we're throwing out right now. We're looking at this Hurts-Sirianni story from a different perspective. Things are good. We're acknowledging things are good right now. But what happens when adversity hits this season and we're trying to figure out, well, when can that occur? So we want to hear from you. When do you think adversity could hit this Eagles team in 2024? And how do you think Hurts and Sirianni will handle that adversity? You can get in 610-632-0975. Because coming up, the other thing I want to get into with Andrew, we keep talking about adversity when it comes to Hurts and Sirianni. We also know everybody's favorite quarterback on every NFL team is the backup quarterback. This Eagles team doesn't really have a clear-cut backup right now. I want to talk about that competition coming up next with Andrew DeCecco. I'm Bill Colarulo. This is Middays. We'll be right back. Welcome back into Middays. Bill Colarulo along with Andrew DeCecco and Ray Dunn. And we got some breaking news.
Now, breaking sports news from 97.5 The Fanatic and 97.5thefanatic.com.
How's everyone doing?
That's right. Nick Foles, Philadelphia Eagles Super Bowl winner, Super Bowl 52 MVP, will officially retire from the NFL as an Eagle when he returns to Philadelphia on Monday, September 16th for the home opener versus the Atlanta Falcons. My man Nick Foles, man, retiring an Eagle. It just feels right. You knew this would happen eventually, but it's amazing that this guy, who went on the most magical run we've ever seen, when you look at the NFC Championship game and then going toe-to-toe with Tom Brady in the Super Bowl, really couldn't duplicate that success anywhere else throughout his career.
And that run that you speak of actually started against the Atlanta Falcons, so it kind of comes full circle. You remember that playoff game? I remember the first play of that game. He threw a pass that was nowhere near Torrey Smith. Torrey Smith got a pass interference penalty, and of course that pass he threw off the knee of Keanu Neal that Torrey later caught, and that kind of set the wheels in motion to a Super Bowl win.
It's amazing how close that 2017 Eagles team came to not even winning that divisional round game. Like, it was that close, where all these amazing memories we have of the NFC Championship game, the Super Bowl. You go back to that game against the Falcons, it could have been a different story very easily, not only with that play, but then you go to Julio Jones had 4 opportunities at a red zone touchdown at the end of the game that wins the game for the Falcons, and we're never getting the speech from Jason Kelce. We're never getting all those memories in Minnesota. But congratulations to Nick Foles on his retirement. That's going to be a game you probably want to be at Monday night, September 16th, home opener against the Atlanta Falcons. Nick Foles coming back to retire a Philadelphia Eagle. And that makes a little bit of sense too, Ray, because Josh Sweat, who changed his number this year to the hideous number 19, which I still don't understand, he had said earlier in the offseason he wanted to change his number to number 9, and the Eagles told him it was off limits. I don't think they're retiring number 9, but it's an unofficial, hey, no one's going to wear that this year.
Yeah, I'm hoping it's that. Just no one's wearing it this year. Like, hey, yeah, we're going to reserve this one, keep this one on ice for Foles to retire.
No, they're not going to retire his number. The Eagles don't retire numbers, man. They don't retire a lot of numbers.
But there's a lot that aren't worn. I mean, when you look at it, for example, well, obviously 20 isn't worn, and there's a number of them that, like, you wonder.
Well, that is retired, I think.
20 is retired.
20 is retired.
92 is retired. 99 is retired.
I'm going to pull them all up for you right now.
Because there's some numbers that just aren't worn, but they're not officially retired right now.
Number 5 will always love you.
Donovan's retired. Steve Van Buren, number 15. Brian Dawkins, number 20. Tom Brookshire, number 40. Pete Retzlaff, number 44. Concrete Charlie, Chuck Benderek, number 60. Al Wistert, number 70. Reggie, number 92. And Jerome Brown, 99. In fact, for our YouTube audience, I'm rocking Jerome and Reggie on my T-shirt today. So those are all retired. But, yeah, they do. They don't let people.
Like 71 for Jason Peters isn't occupied and hasn't been, for example.
Yeah, now number 9. You know what always bothered me was that they turned around and gave Jay Ajayi number 36.
Yeah, now Tristan McCullum wears number 36. He's fighting to make the Eagles roster.
B. West deserved a little bit more than that. Come on now.
I would think so. And 25. Nobody really wears 25 for LaShawn McCoy.
You think 62 is going down? You think that's going to get retired?
That one, I believe, will officially get retired. Just a matter of when.
What about 91?
91, no, because then you start retiring all these numbers. 90-man rosters in training camps. So, I mean, you're going to have like 3 guys wearing number 46 or whatever.
How do you retire Kelsey's number but not Cox's? Aren't they really? Look,
I think you have to break it down in all pros, Hall of Fame candidacy. All these things are at play here when you make that decision.
What about 55 for BG? He's going to go down as he already has the most games played in franchise history. And then number 2 and number 3 are Kelsey and Cox. Do all 3 of those guys get their numbers retired?
I think Kelsey has the best chance just because I believe out of that group, he will be a Hall of Famer. It's just Fletcher's on the fence. And then, then if we're splitting the hairs here, then what about 87 for Brent Selleck, right? I mean, you kind of...
No.
But
Andrew DeCecco with the hot take of the day, you can't compare Brent Selleck to Jason Kelsey, Ray Dunn.
No, you said Brandon Graham at number 55 because of all the years that he played.
All right, I'll give you that. But BG played a lot more years than Brent Selleck. I wouldn't put them on the same level. But I agree. I don't think you retire BG. I don't think you retire. I don't know. Fletcher Cox is a close one for me. Fletcher Cox is a close one. If you want to get in on that conversation, send us a text. Should the Eagles retire Jason Kelsey and Fletcher Cox's numbers? I'm just curious what our listeners think on that one. Wonder if anybody's checking in on YouTube. Mopar says Cox and Jason Kelsey are in 2 different categories. Kelsey should have his number retired.
So he's in agreement with me.
He is, but I don't know how you put... Look, Jason Kelsey, yes, greatest center we've ever seen potentially. But to say they're not in the same category, I don't know. Fletcher Cox's career here, are we going to really undervalue what he did at the D-tackle position? Like you said, he is a borderline Hall of Famer. He's one of the best Philadelphia Eagles we've seen in the last decade.
Right. I think sometimes you take what Fletcher did for granted because he was so effective for so long. And even last season on that skid, he was their most consistent defensive player. But if you look at it and you really break down his stats versus Hall of Fame level defensive tackles, you could look at Warren Sapp, for example. His numbers aren't quite there. If he were to have played another season, because remember, he still is playing at a high level last season, he probably would have a much more definitive opportunity to get in the Hall of Fame. He's still on the cusp as it is right now, but Kelsey's a lock.
Kelsey is a lock. Kelsey should be a first ballot. I'm looking, Dylan McKinnon's checking in on our YouTube chat saying that no one's worn 87 since Selleck. No one's worn 12 since Randall Cunningham, even though neither have been retired.
Nice. Thanks, Dylan. Yeah, I didn't think anybody wore 87. I think somebody was issued that in training camp last summer. In fact, I'm a nerd because I know this. It's Jaden Hazelwood. He was a wide receiver who was undrafted. He was given 87. I thought that was kind of odd.
Interesting. So this conversation got sparked because Nick Foles is going to retire a Philadelphia Eagle. If you just missed the news, Monday night, Atlanta Falcons, September 16th for the home opener. Nick Foles will be back in the building to get honored and retire officially as an Eagle. So pretty cool. And no one has worn number 9 since Nick Foles left here to go to become the starter in Jacksonville. That lasted a couple games before he broke his collarbone and then just could never put it all together for a whole season. It's unfortunate, but Nick Foles is a man who should never have to buy a drink in this town. We'll always love Nicky Foles. Can't say his nickname on the air, unfortunately. But you all remember my man Nick. Ray wants to say something. You want to say his nickname on the air?
No, I'm not saying anything.
You getting bold on your 2-year anniversary today?
No, listen, I'm good. I appreciate it,
Table
though.
it, Ray. Table it.
Yeah.
And again, a
me
big
on here.
congratulations to our man Ray Dunn, celebrating 2 years at the Fanatic today.
Love Ray. He's a rising star.
So, Raymond, let's talk about the topic we were talking about, which was Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts. Because Sirianni and Hurts, you all had an opportunity to read the article. Some of you probably said, I'm not reading it. I'm over the drama between Hurts and Sirianni. I hear you. I do think we've moved on. I do think Hurts and Sirianni are in a lot better place today than they were when the season ended, of course. And things will be fine as long as they win. You hear that cliche a lot. Winning cures all. As long as this team wins football games, things will be good. They're good right now because they're not playing football games, because it's practice. But when can adversity hit this season? And we talked about the beginning of the year. It could happen right away in Green Bay. I'm already telling people, patience. I expect this team to come out and play well, but if they don't, let's not overreact. There's been a lot of change. There's a lot of change to the offense. There's a lot of change to the schemes. Jalen Hurts is now calling blitz protection, something he didn't have to do in the past. He's got a new center in Cam Jurgens. We know about all the change in personnel on defense. So there's a lot of change. Be a little patient if they don't come out firing on all cylinders. But there's another aspect of that schedule that makes me nervous, Andrew. It's not just the beginning of the year where maybe they're not playing to their best ability. It's week 8 through week 13. And I said earlier, I'm not going to call it a gauntlet, but it certainly is an ugly stretch. You look at week 8 through week 13. 5 of those 6 games are against very good quarterbacks. You got Joe Burrow in Cincinnati. Then you come home against the Jacksonville Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence. Who knows what you have in Trevor Lawrence? But then you're on the road in Dallas against Dak Prescott, who was unbelievable at home last year. Then you have a game at home against Washington. We don't know what you're going to get in Jaden Daniels, but the Commanders always seem to play the Eagles tough. And then you go on the road, Matt Stafford and the Rams, Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. For me, those 6 games right there could be where the team hits. If they don't hit adversity early, if they come out and they're able to win in Brazil, keep saying in Green Bay because it feels like a road game, and they win in Brazil, okay, now you have a little bit of an easier stretch. You got the early bye week, couple games in there, Cleveland, New York. But then that week 8 through 13, if adversity hits there, how does this team handle it?
You said something interesting there because you mentioned the Commanders. Yeah, on paper, they're not a team that's ready to win or contend for anything right now, but Jaden Daniels might be able to do enough to light a spark there where they could sneak out a win. The Rams, I'm really high on. I think Matthew Stafford is one of the more underrated quarterbacks in the NFL. They have a really good defense. Traveling out there is never an easy task. And you mentioned the Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore Ravens coming off that Rams game from the West Coast to play a very physical team like the Baltimore Ravens. That could be that's a modified version of a gauntlet. But I think that the Eagles right now are equipped to handle that. And again, this is August. It's training camp. Everything's good right now. There haven't been any meaningful games. But from what I've observed through training camp right now, there's a lot of optimism. Everyone seems to be really upbeat, and things seem to be trending in the right direction, which is encouraging. See, it's something to keep an eye on. But I think right now you have to be pleased with what you've seen.
And look, I think most teams are pleased with what they're seeing in training camp. Most. I mean, if you're the Seattle Seahawks.
Or the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, the Cowboys. But the Seattle Seahawks yesterday probably didn't love that DK Metcalf is taking somebody's helmet off and trying to swing it. He ended up hitting former Eagle Kevon Wallace, from what I read. But
is Kayvon okay?
I don't know. We will see. But look, most people are feeling good about what their team looks like. You're right. There are teams like the Cowboys and the 49ers who are dealing with some off-the-field issues. We'll keep monitoring the whole Brandon Ayuk stuff. The Brandon Ayuk stuff in San Francisco got to a fever pitch of he's going to be traded, and now all of a sudden it's quiet again. I hope he doesn't go back. I hope he doesn't return. But we'll talk about that coming up because there's a dark horse team that was mentioned that maybe could swoop in and grab him. Here's what I want to talk to you about, Andrew. We're talking about adversity, where it could hit in this schedule, and we're looking at it from the basis of, well, how do Hurts and Sirianni get along? I pray that we don't get calls here at the station this season calling for the backup quarterback because Hurts is struggling. We've already got him this offseason during mandatory minicamp when there were reports that Jalen's not playing well. But in every city, as soon as the starting quarterback starts to struggle, everybody wants to go to the backup quarterback. This Eagles team, I hope we never see the backup. But who is the backup? Because they made the trade for Kenny Pickett from the Pittsburgh Steelers. A lot of people assumed he's going to be your backup quarterback. But I'm hearing a lot about how good Tanner McKee has looked. And when Kellen Moore spoke to the media the other day, he talked about the quarterbacks. Listen to Kellen Moore.
Yeah, Tanner's doing an awesome job. Kenny's doing an awesome job. Really has two complete, independent things. It's not necessarily they're associated with each other. I think both those guys are having really good camps. Sometimes when you're a younger guy, sometimes we just like to put you in some different situations where you're with different guys on the field, whether it be with a second group or a first group, all those different things. You try and mix and match these things just to give yourself different perspective for these guys. And so Kenny's handled it awesome. Tanner's handled it awesome. It's been really good for these guys.
Kellen Moore, who talks like a head coach, doesn't give us much there as far as who's got the lead in this competition. You've been down there every single day. What are you witnessing now? Everyone talks about how good Jalen Hurts has looked. Backup quarterback, who's it going to be?
Well, I would say that both Kenny Pickett and Tanner McKee have held the ball a decent amount in 7-on-7s, which is a drill really skewed heavily towards the offense. But by and large, when they have had a chance to uncork it and throw the football, they've been on the mark. I think Kenny Pickett gives you a lot more athleticism than Tanner McKee does. I think he's been a little bit more consistent, though Tanner McKee started to come on of late. But the Eagles gave up a decent compensation, significant compensation, to bring in Tanner McKee, or to bring in Kenny Pickett, and that's a position that they have historically really valued. And I think that if you were to play a game without Jalen Hurts, Kenny Pickett right now gives you the best chance to win. So I think right now he would be the number 2 and not really have to look over his shoulder. But then it becomes interesting because I think Tanner McKee is going to be a guy that they groom to be the 2 in the future.
Yeah, look, you look at Jalen Hurts, played all 17 games last year. In 2022, he does miss a couple of games, and what you want from your backup quarterback is they can come in and they can win you a game or two so that your season's not over. Minshew couldn't do it, even though he actually played pretty well, Gardner Minshew. A couple turnovers that I blame on Quez Watkins. Tanner McKee looked good last year in the preseason, but you do have to take that with a grain of salt because we've talked about this before when we're evaluating should the starters play in the preseason. I always say no because you're getting such vanilla defenses anyway. You're not going to learn whether Jalen Hurts can pick up blitz protections against a defense that's not game planning or putting any disguises on their blitz. They're not coming out with these exotic blitz packages against your team. Same thing can be said for the backup quarterback because we're going to see Kenny Pickett. We're going to see Tanner McKee. They're going to be going up against second and third stringers. They're probably both going to look very good, and you got to figure out, well, who's running the offense the most efficiently.
And I'm glad you mentioned that because context when you're evaluating preseason play is so critical when you're trying to assess who should be where on the depth chart. I think you have to take in the body of work, and you have to be able to forecast what they would be able to do if they were plugged in a situation where it really mattered. And I think Kenny Pickett right now would give the Eagles the best chance to win if Jalen Hurts was unable to play. And right now, Tanner McKee has shown some good signs. Seems like he's on a good trajectory in terms of his development. But right now, he's not. You traded a third-round pick to get Kenny Pickett. He's going to be your 2.
Yeah, and Kenny Pickett, 12 games in 2022 went 7-5. 12 games in 2023 went 7-5. So you would expect him to have the ability that, God forbid, Jalen misses a game or two, he can come in and win one. You're not going to get what our man Nick Foles did. That's never happening again. If Jalen Hurts gets injured, which, knock on wood, doesn't happen, the chance of a backup quarterback coming in and leading your team to a Super Bowl is slim to none. That's not happening again, and that's why our backup quarterback, the greatest backup quarterback of all time, is going to retire as a Philadelphia Eagle. If you missed the news, Monday, September 16th, coming back to the Link for the home opener, and Nick Foles will be there to officially retire as a Philadelphia Eagle. Some pretty cool stuff. What's also cool stuff, FanFest, online ticket raid. We are 40 minutes away. The 97.5 The Fanatic FanFest 2024 with FanDuel is back Saturday, September 28th at Xfinity Live. You can get your tickets in 40 minutes at 12 noon at 975thefanatic.com. There will be an online ticket raid. It sells out quickly. I urge you to get to 975thefanatic.com right away. 12 noon is when the online raid starts. This is the biggest party of the year if you're a Philadelphia sports fan. All of us hosts are going to be there. You're going to have celebrity guests, Philly sports legends, activities, games, and prizes. Nick Foles was there last year. Come on now. 975thefanatic.com has all the information. When we get back, I want to revisit the conversation about retaliating in Major League Baseball. Get an update on our Twitter poll, and I want to get to some texts and get to some of your calls about that. How do you feel about retaliating in baseball? We saw it last night. Matt Strom sticking up for Nick Castellanos. And with that, can that help bring this team out of the funk that they were in? Not only with the win last night, but you do something like that. Does it get you going in the right direction? We'll talk about it coming up next. 97.5 The Fanatic, middays. Bill Colarulo with you today, along with Andrew DeCecco. Ray Dunn, always behind the glass. 2-year anniversary for our man Ray Dunn today. Great 2 years here at The Fanatic, Ray.
Obviously, the biggest story going on right now.
Biggest story.
Yeah.
Not Nick Foles.
To me, it is.
Yeah. Not Nick Foles coming back to retire as an Eagle. Not the 10-page article about Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts from yesterday. Not the Philadelphia Phillies winning another series against the Dodgers. No. It's about Ray Dunn's 2-year anniversary. But as we talk about the Phillies, if you stayed up last night, I know a lot of people don't stay up for these games and they wait until the morning to just get the highlights. It is late, especially when you get that many nights in a row of it. They should have thrown in a day game somewhere, Ray, and they didn't do it for us. But in the 8th inning last night, and the Phillies win 9-4, but in the 8th inning last night, Nick Castellanos steps to the plate. Michael Grove decides to throw a high fastball inside that hits Castellanos. Nick wasn't happy. Uses a word we can't use on the air, but basically tells him that's a pretty bad miss, dog. And then in the bottom of the 8th, the very next half inning, Matt Strom gets to the mound, and he says, I got my man's back. And he retaliates by throwing at Gavin Lux of the L.A. Dodgers. You don't see retaliating in Major League Baseball a lot anymore. And we started the show throwing that question out to all of you. How do you feel about retaliating in baseball? I like it when it's to protect your players. I know that sounds weird because if you're throwing at somebody, how are you protecting players? But I don't want opposing pitchers to be able to throw at my guys without there being some sort of retaliation coming back their way. Let them police themselves. It's the same reason why I am all for fighting in the National Hockey League. These guys protect each other. They police themselves. You're going to take a run at one of my teammates in hockey? Well, you're going to have to answer for it. It's a part of the game. Now, I'm not suggesting they should throw at people's heads. I'm not saying that. I don't like that at all. I also am not suggesting that you should throw at someone for celebrating. I think there should be more celebrating in Major League Baseball. Let these players have a personality. Let them be themselves. Maybe it'll actually help your product a little bit because you do a terrible job of marketing your stars. Let them have personalities. But with that said, I was okay with Matt Strom throwing at Gavin Lux to stick up for his teammate. And could this be something, I'll throw it to you, Andrew and Ray, could this be something that now this team can build off of? Look, they were going through a little bit of a rough stretch. They now win 2 straight. They've won 3 of 4, win a series against the second-best team in the National League, and now this happens. I think it helps bring a team even closer.
I do too. When you take up for your teammate in that fashion, and you're letting him know you have his back, right? And when you're going into a series now that the Diamondbacks are red hot, coming off 4 consecutive wins, you're able to kind of use that as a springboard towards that final stretch of the season that you need to be able to finish strong and get into the October baseball or in the fall where things really start to matter. I think you're able to use this as something that's very positive.
Ray, you don't like it simply from a baseball perspective because you don't want to put a guy on base, you said.
Yeah. Their job to try and score runs becomes easier to score a run when you're staying on first without really having to do anything at the plate. All you had to do was get hit by a pitch. I mean, it hurts, but you didn't make them work for that base. I want you to work for that base.
That's fair.
It's a fair point, and we threw it out to all of you, and you can still text us on that, 610-632-0975. What are your opinions about retaliating in baseball? Do we have any texts on the board, Ray?
Yeah, we got a texter check it in very simply. I like pitchers letting their teammates know they have their back in that scenario.
It's exactly why I like it, too. Look, Matt Strom now, you think Castellanos and him got a little bit closer after what happened yesterday? You think Casty now wants to go up there and get a hit for his pitcher if Matt Strom's the one that's going to come in to try to close things down? There's a lot to like about it. There is a lot to like about it. We also put up a Twitter poll because we were curious what everybody's opinion was on it. Where are we at on the Twitter poll, Ray?
In last night's Phillies game, it appeared Matt Strom retaliated for Castellanos being hit by throwing at Dodgers hitter Gavin Lux. What's your position on retaliating in baseball? 93% of the vote love it. 7% hate it.
And you're able to determine who the foxhole guys are. Matt Strom is a foxhole guy.
Yes, he is. Ricky Bo certainly is a foxhole guy, throwing at Barry Bonds way back in the day. We played that clip for you earlier. But 93% of people love it, and only 7% hate it, according to our Twitter followers. I still firmly believe if you put this Twitter poll up in Minnesota or Missouri or somewhere in the Midwest, these numbers may be different. But here in Philadelphia, you're damn right we love it.
Do we love it today because half of the fan base is looking for a spark? Is that what, because I feel like for some people it's like, yeah, this team needs to get their mojo going. Like, I'll be honest with you, I think 3 home runs from Schwarber fires me up more than firing a fastball at an opposing team's player. Like, I can't. I understand some people today are looking for, like, oh, yeah, what's going to launch this team back into what they were for 3.5 months. I think them hitting is doing that. I think them starting to come alive as a group is doing that. Not, oh, yeah, Strom decided Lux needed to wear one because Castellanos took a pitch. Like, I'll be honest with you, I think some of this, for some people today, it's like, yeah, this is going to fire them up. I don't know. Hitting the baseball seems to fire me up. Like, Turner had 2 hits last night. That's a good sign. That could be carried on.
I am with you, but it also doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. You're right. If all they're doing is, we've seen this before, though, and I don't have, like, a specific time in mind. I just remember seeing before where there was a benches clearing brawl, and then the next thing you know, a team goes on a couple of wins in a row because they're fired up. It can do things for a team. Now, you're not wrong. The fact that Schwarber goes 4 for 4 last night with 3 home runs and 7 RBIs, yeah, that's probably firing them up as well. Tyler Phillips, although not his best outing, I love the way he battled last night. He got out. What inning was it? Was it the 3rd where he had to get out of the jam he was in, and he took on Ohtani? Ohtani fouled out to 3rd. I'm forgetting the inning.
They've been able to contain Ohtani, like, to the comparison of the rest of Major League Baseball. I think going into his final at bat last night, he was hit like 238 this season against the Phillies, and it's a small sample size. He still had a home run in there. He still had extra base hits in there, but comparatively, they've been able to kind of hold Ohtani in check, which, I'm sweating every time it comes to the plate. But they've compared to what the numbers you'd expect, and like you're holding your breath every time he comes up to bat. They've done a decent job against the guy. Phillips himself did a decent job against him. I think he got to see him 3 times, and I don't think he got a hit.
Phillips has certainly showed us a lot, because you and I were talking about this yesterday, Ray, of what kind of outing were you going to get from Tyler Phillips last night going against a lineup as deep as the Dodgers, now that teams have a book on him, because he's pitched a lot now. Teams get a book on him. Not a lights-out outing, but certainly good enough from your 5th starter last night.
Perfectly in the middle. We were talking about, can it be in the middle of the complete game shutout, and can it be in the middle of the Mariners game where he goes an inning in 2/3 and gives up 8 runs? Basically, if you want to middle out 9 innings and no runs, an inning in 2/3 and 8 runs, 5 innings and 4 runs is about perfectly in the middle there for you. I thought it was what I would expect. I didn't feel great during all of it because they were doing a good job of getting on base, putting him in tough situations, but he battled. And I think that was the best you could ask for a guy in his position against a lineup like that. He battled. He gave you a chance to win the ball game. And Kyle Schwarber, really, but this lineup, to give everyone the credit when they win, Kyle Schwarber came through for you in a big way, and now it's going back to that house of horrors.
It is going back to that house of horrors, and they have 4 of them coming up against Arizona. So we'll see how all that goes.
I hate when they go there so much. Even before last year as LCS. I hate them going to the desert.
Is Zach Gallen going to be on the mound at all during this 4-game stretch?
I know tonight we get Montgomery because that was everyone's darling there for a while. So we'll get a chance to see.
Because you know where Zach Gallen went to high school.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, no, I'm aware. I know exactly where you're going.
Another Bishop Eustace guy. Tyler Phillips last night, Bishop Eustace guy.
And by the way, have we gotten an update on Austin Hayes yet with the hamstring injury?
I haven't seen anything. Ray, let us know if we do get an update on Austin Hayes. Good point, Andrew, because now this is going to be interesting. You brought in Austin Hayes to be your everyday left fielder, and you were looking like you were giving Brandon Marsh an opportunity to be your everyday center fielder. Hayes goes down last night. They got to move Marsh over. Rojas comes in. But you saw how good Rojas is in center field, man.
Little finger wag.
What you saw the complete opposite. Marsh, no reason he misses that fly ball. It would have been a very good catch, but it certainly wasn't an uncatchable baseball. And he was even surprised he missed it. And then Rojas comes in and is probably the outfielder on the team that could make that play.
Made a couple. I mean, the one obviously running into the wall was incredible. He made a diving catch later on. He's an amazing defensive center fielder. Now, you might have unintentionally found out that Marsh isn't totally overmatched against lefties right now, in this little stretch where he gave the tryout. Like, one of the good things that might have come out of this is like, hey, Marsh isn't totally unplayable against left-handed bats or left-handed pitchers, but now where's the place in him, place in the lineup if Hayes isn't out for a while, which it looks like they talked about, say, grabbing. Anytime they say it grabbed, I think an injured list stint is probably coming up for Hayes, and that's probably Marsh and Rojas as your left fielder, center fielder.
You're going to need a big right-handed bat, though. You still have Weston Wilson. You got Edmundo Sosa. Did I hear you say Scott Kingery this morning? Maybe
I
coming
only was reading that from the Gelb story talking about who was in the organization. Don't you put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby. I am not the one that's going to start the we got to get Kingery up here conversation.
I guess Weston Wilson's going to have to step up here. Could, potentially, depending on the severity.
He's your big bat off the bench. Still angry they didn't bring him in the other night when Garrett Stubbs is up at the plate, 2 outs, man on first, down 2. You had Sosa and Wilson on the bench, and Rob Thompson decided not to. But, hey, we're looking forward. We're looking ahead. We'll continue with the Phillies talk, but I also want to get back into the Philadelphia Eagles because we were talking about the article a little bit yesterday, but in a different light, saying, I believe everything is good now. Andrew believes everything is good now. But when you look at the schedule, where could adversity hit and how is this team going to handle it? So I want to continue with that. But I also want to talk to Andrew and Ray about an article that was written by CBS Sports. Garrett Podell. They ranked the 2024 NFC contenders by tiers. There's a tier 1, real deal contenders, tier 2, fringe contenders, and tier 3, happy to be here division winners, tier 4, wild card winners, and then tier 5, how many days until the NFL draft. And I was a little surprised where the Philadelphia Eagles came in on these tiers. So we'll get into that coming up next.
Tyrone
Welcome back into Middays. Bill Colarulo, Andrew DeCecco, Ray Dunn with you. Just keeping the seat warm until Monday. If you haven't heard the news, then you haven't been listening. Mikey Miss is coming back. We have a brand new midday show kicking off Monday, 10 a.m. You'll have Mikey Miss sitting in this chair. I'll be sitting over there. Ray Dunn will be behind the glass. We are excited. We met yesterday as a show. And I'm telling you, I know this sounds biased. It's going to be a great show. So make sure you tune in Monday, 10 a.m. But I got my man Andrew DeCecco with me today, who does a great job covering the Philadelphia Eagles for us here as our Birds Insider. And if you haven't listened to the Birds Insider show at 6 o'clock, make sure you tune in tonight. You get Andrew DeCecco as you always do, but you also got Ray Dunn tonight on the Birds Insider Training Camp Edition.
Look at that. It's gonna be fun.
Can confirm the reports.
You can. I've also heard you may shave your head in solidarity with me.
No. I know.
Can't confirm that.
Listen,
no, not going to happen.
People are asking. I shaved my head because you can't see on YouTube that I do have a bald spot on the back of my head. So I shaved it. The problem is on YouTube, there's a bright light above my head. It makes this thing shine. It looks like I bicked the thing. I didn't even bick it. But on YouTube, man, this thing, whew. I'm like,
shining, man. I need sunglasses over here.
I'm like, did I make a mistake with this shaving my head? But anyway.
Now all of it's a bald spot.
We digress. Right before the break, I talked about this CBS article where they ranked the Super Bowl contenders by tiers. Before I get there, I want to go to the phones because Silver from Germantown's been waiting to get on because he thinks the Eagles are going to win the Super Bowl, Andrew DeCecco. Yo, Silver, what's up, man? You're on The Fanatic.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like, health-wise, if everybody stays healthy and we still have the same roster that we started the season with, the end of the season, it's playoff time, we have enough talent to be able to beat all the teams in the NFC. Am I correct?
All the NFC teams, NFC East, I'm with you. We'll talk about the NFC, but there's a player you're high on that makes you think this, and it's Devin White.
Devin White, Saquon Barkley, you bring back Gardner Johnson, you draft, Quinyon Mitchell, and you tuck away Rodgers for a season. Now he's ready to rock and roll.
Yeah, that looks like a great move. Silver, appreciate you. So Devin White, Isaiah Rodgers, you've been down there. One of the big X factors for this defense, Andrew, in my opinion, is going to be Devin White because I'm not completely sold on him yet. I'm coming around. Everything I'm hearing how much of a leader he's been. He's got all of the upside. He's got the potential. There's a reason he's drafted 5th overall. But if this guy turns out to be the real deal at linebacker, this defense can be a lot better than a lot of us thought.
Yeah, and the leadership aspect, Bill, which you mentioned, really stuck out to me in his press conference the first time he was available during training camp. He said that he initiated a group message with Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown, sending a picture of just an empty glass and saying, let's pour into it every day. So I think him seeking out two prominent leaders on the Eagles, and he knows that this is his opportunity to kind of use this as a launching pad to getting him back to where he was a couple of seasons ago. I think he's not taking this for granted. And you're seeing a player who has seen the vast majority of the first-team reps. He's been the constant every day. You see him be able to really surge downhill and get some good pressure as a blitzer. He's doing well in space. He's their most well-rounded linebacker. He gives them that sideline-to-sideline speed. But you're right. He is the X factor. He's the one who's done it at a high level in the NFL before, and a lot of the other players at that position are sort of unknown entities.
It'll be exciting if he can grow into a very good linebacker. And certainly Vic Fangio will help, being a guy who's a great teacher. And who's the linebacker coach now?
Oh, I should know that. It's off the top of my head.
I know. I drew a blank
Bobby
too.
King. It's Bobby King. He comes over from the Tennessee Titans.
Exactly. So you got him from the Titans. You brought in Clint Hurt on that defensive line. You got Christian Parker on the back end.
Joe Casper coaching the safeties. He's another ascending coach.
A lot of good teachers on that defense. That has me excited. But it doesn't have CBS Sports that excited because this CBS Sports article, I just can't agree with this. So they ranked the 2024 NFC contenders by tiers. Tier number 1, real deal contenders. The San Francisco 49ers, the Green Bay Packers, and the Detroit Lions. not the Philadelphia Eagles. They do not have the Eagles listed as a real deal contender. You look at FanDuel Sportsbook right now. The Eagles have better odds to win the Super Bowl by far than the Green Bay Packers. They're only a little behind the Detroit Lions. The Lions are plus 1,200. The Eagles are plus 1,300. I'm not saying the Eagles are going to win the Super Bowl, but to not list them as a real deal contender to me just seems wrong.
What was the criteria? What was their logic behind their decision making?
So here's what it says. Training camp is in full swing around the NFL, which means all of the league's 32 teams are peddling optimism. However, it's important to sift through all the sunshine and roses in order to set realistic expectations. Sure, there are surprises every year, and it lists a couple, but keeping that in mind, which squads should be viewed as legitimate contenders for the Vince Lombardi Trophy out of the NFC? So it doesn't necessarily say. It says it's an educated assessment of the NFC's 16 teams and where they belong across 5 tiers. So tier 1, Eagles aren't in it. Not real deal contenders. It says the Niners, the Packers, the Lions. They have the Eagles falling in to tier number 2 as a fringe contender. And in the write-up, it says the Eagles replaced their offensive coordinator and their defensive coordinator. Coach Sirianni's retooled staff once again boasts one of the better rosters in football. Should the Philly offense play more like it did in 2022 with running back Saquon Barkley in the backfield, the Eagles could make a deep playoff run. They're relying on untested youth at corner with 2023 fourth-round pick Keely Ringo and rookie Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean expected to play big roles, which will be something to monitor. And along with them as fringe contenders, the Los Angeles Rams and the Dallas Cowboys. See, I disagree with some of the things in there. First of all, Coach Nick Sirianni's retooled staff once again boasts one of the better rosters in football. I get extremely frustrated when people say that last year's Eagles team was one of the best in football. That defense was terrible.
It was horrible. Like you saw what they really were when they were going up against a team like the San Francisco 49ers. They just could not compete with some of the better teams.
So I want to continue to react to this because it goes down and lists other tiers and teams that have zero shot. But I want to remind you, coming up in 5 minutes, our online ticket raid for Fanatic FanFest 2024 with FanDuel. It's Saturday, September 28th, down Xfinity Live. You can get your tickets in 5 minutes at 975thefanatic.com for our latest online ticket raid. It sells out quickly. So make sure you get over there. This is the biggest party of the year for Philadelphia sports fans. All of us hosts, celebrity guests, Philly sports legends, activities, games, prizes, and a lot more. 975thefanatic.com has all the info. Get there right now for our online ticket raid in less than 5 minutes. Coming up, we're going to continue to have the conversation about this article. Where should the Eagles rank as far as contenders in the NFC? And I want to revisit our question that I had for Ray Dunn earlier in the show and get Andrew's take on it. We'll do all that coming up next.
FanFest.com.
Welcome back in the middays. Bill Colarulo with Andrew DeCecco today. Ray Dunn behind the glass. It's 12 o'clock. Hopefully you're on 975thefanatic.com right now getting your tickets in our latest online ticket raid for our FanFest. That's September 28th. I'll let you know when it sells out because it sells out quickly on these online ticket raids. But right before the break, I was talking about an article that CBS Sports put out, Garrett Podell, where they ranked all of the 16 NFC teams by tiers in terms of contenders. And for real deal contenders, they put the Niners, the Packers, and the Lions. I don't disagree that those three teams should be in there, Andrew. But I do think the Eagles should be considered a real deal contender. Do you disagree?
So I'm okay with them being in the fringe category for the reason being that their defense has a lot of question marks. I don't think that they're quite good enough at linebacker. They have a lot of youth there in the secondary that if they're able to pan out, and they're all able to pan out, you're going to be all right. You're going to be great. But if they're not, or if there's time that it's like a growing pain that you're working through, well, that's why they would be on the fringe. You don't know what they're going to be able to do yet, and that's all that they have to assess right now. So I think with those unknown variables, that certainly plays into the thought process here.
I would agree with you if also on the fringe contender category wasn't the Cowboys, because I think the Cowboys are going to be terrible this year.
So do I. There's just so much turmoil coming out of there right now before they've even played a meaningful game.
So you have
The issue that you guys are taking with this, I'm going to let you figure out what's going on over there.
I had a bar right before we came on, and I think it was, I don't know what just happened. Go ahead.
It's okay, I'm going to let you have your moment.
Go ahead, Ray.
The issue that you guys are having with the Cowboys is funny because my biggest issue is how are the Packers ahead of you? The Packers had problems on defense as well a season ago. Now, it's not as disastrous as the Eagles, and the Packers did win a postseason game, and everyone wants to love on Jordan Love, and hey, justifiably so. The man's a stud. He does have to do it over a full season. But I can't imagine a world in which I am crowning them a whole tier ahead of the Eagles just for with no thought and second guessing of it. I think
they should be on the fringe level too.
Right. If they're a legitimate contender, I put the Eagles up there. If they're a fringe, I'll put the Eagles there. I put them in a similar tier coming into this season. That's the one I take. The Cowboys are going to be listed as a contender because, look at the talent of that team. It's the Dallas Cowboys. If we don't listen, it's going to generate a little bit of buzz.
Well, here's what the author in the article talked about who ranked them with regard to the Packers. Defensively, swapping out the zone-heavy scheme of Joe Barry for the aggressive man-coverage-heavy scheme of new defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley may be exactly what the Packers need to bring the Lombardi Trophy home. And then they cite to Xavier McKinney, who I really wanted to see the Eagles get. But I'm with you. They should probably be a fringe contender as well, only because you haven't seen them do it for more than 8 games. They weren't a great team to start the year. We will see. So you have the Cowboys, the Eagles, and the Rams as tier 2 fringe contenders. Happy to be here, division winners, the Bucs and the Falcons. Obviously, because the NFC South. Let me ask you, this is an interesting question. We talked about the NFC divisions yesterday a little bit, and we were talking about, is the NFC East going to be the NFC least this year? Where should they be in terms of the toughest divisions in the NFL? What division do you think is going to be more difficult this season? The NFC South, which was a joke last year, or the NFC East? Which one's tougher?
I would probably say the NFC East, because I think that there's always that team that you don't really prepare for. They kind of sneak up on you. And I think that could be the Commanders this year, because I like what they've done in the offseason to restructure that roster, add a lot of youth and athleticism there. They have a new coaching staff that are going to bring in new ideologies. I think that they may be a team to keep an eye on.
And you look at the NFC South, the Carolina Panthers will still stink. I'm not sold on Bryce Young. I don't think that team's going to be very good. The Falcons should be better, but obviously going through a lot of change, all new coaches across the board with Raheem Morris as the head coach, Zach Robinson, a first-year offensive coordinator there from the Rams. Jimmy Lake's the defensive coordinator who came from the Rams as well. So the Rams lost a lot of coaches with Raheem Morris leaving, and he took a lot of his staff with him. and you have Kirk Cousins. But I think Atlanta will be better, and you still have the Saints and the Bucks. I know I get hated on when I say this all the time because I'll have people come at me that the Baker Mayfield beat you in the wild card game when I say Baker Mayfield stinks. Baker Mayfield stinks. I think the Tampa Bay Bucks are going to regret that contract just as much as the New York Giants are regretting the contract that they gave Daniel Jones. Baker Mayfield stinks. What you saw last year, first of all, was the Bucks taking advantage of a team who had clearly checked out. The Eagles were not a very good football team at the end of the year. But I think the Bucks are going to regret that contract, Andrew. Are you a Baker guy?
No, not at all. And I think that really speaks to the level of quarterback play across the NFL when you're willing to shell out that kind of money for a Baker Mayfield level quarterback or Baker Mayfield himself. Teams are more comfortable with going with the known versus the unknown.
Ray, you a Baker guy?
No, not really. I mean, like, there was fun with him in college. You know, I think back to the Ohio State and with the Oklahoma flag and planting it, like all that stuff. Like I liked the personality. Like I kind of liked his, cockiness and arrogance with it. In the NFL, there's a reason why he hasn't lasted anywhere. Like he's just not that level of quarterback. I think Andrew's hit it on the head there with if you're going to pay Baker Mayfield, boy, are you trying to make something out of nothing?
3 years, $100 million he got.
That's insane.
And they started that season last year 4-7, and then went on to be the 5th team in NFL history to win a playoff game after a 4-7 start. It's unfortunate that the playoff game they won was the Philadelphia Eagles.
And he got exposed the next round.
He's terrible, man. Honestly, I think Baker Mayfield's terrible. Absolutely terrible.
I think that's the ultimate indictment on the Eagles. Like last year.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he
run
picked
out of
them
there.
apart.
Yeah.
He picked them apart.
Run out of there.
Yeah. Last year was obviously very, very bad. We'll talk more about that in a second because I do want to get Andrew's opinion on something that came out in that article about what Jalen Hurts did before that game and reaching out to Martindale. I do want to talk to you about that. Tier 4, can't read today. Wild card wilderness. I was going to call it wilderness. Wild card wilderness. It's a tongue twister. The Bears, the Saints, the Seahawks, the Vikings, the Commanders. You think the Commanders can make the playoffs this year? They haven't proved.
I don't think they can make the playoffs, but I think they'll be a team that's fun to watch, and they probably start to make some noise later in the season when they get their sea legs.
But this one's got to hurt for Giants fans. And I don't disagree with the author on this. Tier 5, how many days until the 2025 NFL Draft? The Giants, the Cardinals, and the Panthers. The Giants. What a mistake. Joe Shane should not have a job after giving Daniel Jones that contract.
He shouldn't. It's out there. You saw how he handled that whole thing with Saquon, and then you look at the Daniel Jones situation in itself. I don't know how he's still there. He does not have them set up for long-term success at all.
No, he does not. So we'll see. This is just an article. Articles are fun because they're kind of a jumping-off point for you to have discussions. But I'm with Ray. I think Ray made the best point. If the Green Bay Packers are in here as a real-deal contender, how are the Eagles not? So we'll continue to talk about that. But I want to throw out the question that I threw out to Ray earlier in the show. And this one's kind of a fun question, and I want to get some texters in on this conversation. So if you missed the news, there are 2 astronauts right now, Butch and Suni, who were supposed to take a trip, Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams for NASA. They were supposed to take a trip into outer space that was going to last a week. They're on a small little spacecraft, 1 week. They've now been there for 60 days. And according to this report, they may not be able to get them back to Earth until early 2025. I giggle, but really, these poor astronauts, get them home. We pray for their safety, but you're talking 6 months stuck in this confined space with one other person where you were supposed to only be there for a week. So I threw the question out to Ray earlier in the show. Now that we're learning a lot about Nick Sirianni's personality, and now that we're learning a lot about Jalen Hurts' lack of personality, if you were stuck in a spacecraft for 6 months with either Sirianni or Hurts, which one would you rather be with?
Nick Sirianni.
I don't know, man.
As much as I would like to trade wisdom with Jalen for those 6 months. I think that me and Nick Sirianni would be able to talk strategy, talk core values, accountability.
Exactly. You sure you can handle that for 6 months?
I like his intensity, and I feel like the atmosphere would be pretty entertaining for those 6 months.
You're kidding me.
Yeah, I was pretty entertaining. He says that now. He would lose his damn mind. Andrew would open up the door. Just put me out of my misery. You jump out the space shuttle.
Actually, knowing myself, I would very much like some quiet. So I think Jalen might be the smarter pick for me, because after like 5 days, I think I'd be like, all right, man, I'm gonna go sit in the corner.
I have defended Sirianni. I think they made the right decision in bringing him back. I think that he's done a lot more good in 3 seasons than bad. But I don't even think I could handle 6 months in a spacecraft by myself with Nick Sirianni. First of all, not only would you be hearing all the core values over and over and over again, everything would be a competition. It'd be like, I'll float faster than you. I'll eat this spaceship ice cream sandwich faster than you. You remember those? Remember those ice cream sandwiches from outer space? Right. Do you remember those?
I'm thinking about this now. Like, now you really have me thinking about being up there.
I think that would make me better. The competition would make me better.
See, I think I'd rather have Jalen Hurts being very, very quiet, hitting me with all his cliches every single day about the main thing being the main thing.
The rent's due.
I don't know what I don't know. I'm a coffee bean that's just going to boil. I remember that one, the whole coffee bean one.
He's got everything.
Ray's going to get a whole drop board of Jalen Hurts's.
Yeah, I think that's just what's in the works right now for me. It's just finding every single Jalen Hurts ism that I possibly can. But I think 2 hours into core values, I'm like...
You're tapping out.
I'm just sitting there like banging on the window like, please. I'm like staring at the sun. I don't know what I'd be doing there, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. The peace and quiet for me would probably be it. I would be very, very okay with the fact that Hurts and I would probably have very short conversations.
Be very short. But that's the thing. Are you going to go nuts because you have no personality at all from Jalen? Or are you going to go nuts because Nick Sirianni wouldn't shut the hell up about his core values and everything else? I want to throw it out to the text board. Send us a text, 610-632-0975. A fun conversation. You're stuck on a space shuttle, 6 months. Sirianni or Hurts? Who would you rather be there with? We got one on the board?
Yeah, Chris and Philly. Stuck in space, that's an easy one. Nick. At least he would come up with weird things to talk about, and when we got back, he'd talk trash to the cameras. Hurts, I'd have to carry the conversation the whole time and get short answers.
That's a really good point.
That's a great point.
You probably would be entertained more by Nick than, man, Jalen Hurts. That would be... I don't know what you would talk about. I really don't know what you would talk about for 6 months with Jalen Hurts.
I mean, if you're someone who likes your solitude, that would be the optimal choice. But I agree with what he just said about being entertained. There would be no shortage of conversation with Nick Sirianni. I think that would help pass the time.
It's a fun conversation, I guess, to think about, but or not a fun conversation. But hopefully they get these astronauts back, because this is not a funny thing that they're stuck up there. But for whatever reason, it hit me yesterday. Man, who would I rather be stuck with? Because you heard press conferences like back-to-back. They sandwiched the practice. You had Sirianni before practice yesterday, Andrew. You were down there. Mm-hmm. Then you had training camp, and then Jalen Hurts right to the podium. And we aired both of them live here on The Fanatic. If you didn't know that, we air all of the big press conferences here at The Fanatic, so make sure you're tuned in all day, every day. It's completely different things. Sirianni doesn't stop, just rambling on and on and on and on and on, and he'll tell you about his high school coaches and his high school teammates and then his daughter and his son and this and that, and then constantly gets into his core values. And then you get to Jalen Hurts, and it's just cliche after cliche after cliche. I don't know. I think I'm going with Hurts, but that texter is maybe making me rethink my position on this.
It's so funny, the way they handle it. Nick Sirianni, when he's searching for an answer, is going to give you 2 minutes of the runaround. Hurts, while he's searching for an answer, is going to start working his way into just the last really cliche, corny thing that came to his mind. Maybe the last T-shirt he read, maybe a drop off a nice T-shirt. So like, oh yeah, that saying was pretty cool. Now pouring into my cup of knowledge, I believe, is the one that's taken over. I'm excited for the standard conversation to pick back up. Obviously, we'll get the main thing being the main thing in about a month. But these two have such great defense mechanisms for actually answering a question, which is why I think I've enjoyed so much of Vic Fangio speaking, because it's like, yeah, you want something short and sweet to the point and we're going to get something out of it. Well, at least we're going to get Fangio to say something. I don't know how much the players are going to appreciate a year of that honesty. The first couple weeks, yeah, it's just refreshing. It's nice for everything to be honest. The best thing you could say about Sirianni and Hurts is their non-answers, save one Hurts non-answer, probably do very little for everyone else. I'm interested to see the actual honesty and the actual real answers and how they might work for or against someone.
That's a good point. I mean, the real answer for me would be Vic Fangio, although he's not an option. I like how candid he is, and I'm just fascinated. I would like to pick his brain on some of his philosophies.
Fangio's the best. Fangio is a gift to us because he's so honest.
I don't know, actually. If I'm being honest, it's good for me where I sit for his honesty. If I was up there sitting with him for 6 months, his honesty of I don't like the way you're doing this, I don't like the way you're doing that. I'll be honest with you, if it was just the two of us, that may not be an environment I'm conducive for.
But you could look within. It might help you. I feel like I would be a better person.
If I'm up there that long, I'm looking within a lot. There's not a lot going on up there. I'm probably spending a lot of time thinking. I don't need Fangio pointing out every single one of my flaws if it's just the two of us spending time together.
Wow. You and I are going to have a long time together doing middays. I'm going to have to start pointing out all of my problems with you, Ray.
I mean, you'll find a lot of them pretty quickly. I'm shocked you haven't already found a lot of them.
Well, as we're talking about this, Nick Sirianni, I just mentioned, did speak to the media before practice yesterday. And this was in light of this article coming out. He wasn't asked specifically about it, but he was asked about accountability. And one of the major positives of this article, and I do want to talk to Andrew about some of the negatives, but one of the major positives was it talked about how a team source said Nick Sirianni got up in front of the team, spring workouts, accepted responsibility for what happened last year, and a source was quoted as saying, this was a great meeting. He was a true leader. Well, this was Nick Sirianni yesterday talking about accountability. Listen to Nick.
The only way to get better is to really look through the things that you felt like you messed up and get better at them. But it starts with the humility to say, I messed this up. I need to be better at this. If you want a culture of accountability, and you're not being accountable yourself. If I want Taylor Sirianni to be accountable and she sees me blaming things on other people at all time, I'm raising a child that's not going to be accountable. Well, it's the same thing with a team. If I'm not accountable to the that I mess up, if I'm not accountable to the things that I mess up, how am I going to expect them to be accountable to what they mess up? That's been day one here. That's just not off-season 2024 going into the 24 season. That's been what I'm trying to do day one.
So that was Nick Sirianni. Of course, he talks about his daughter in there, but it was a good answer. It was a good answer about accountability. You were in there, and you're down there. Let me ask you, before we get into what Sirianni said, why is it so damn loud every press conference? What's going on down there, Andrew?
Kevin Cooney asked me that question yesterday, and the answer that I have is that players were coming out of the practice bubble, and they were walking onto the field. And beside that were, fans that were, so I would imagine some of the louder cheers were because Saquon Barkley was taking the field, Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, and where we're sitting, that tent that we're sitting under is stationed right beside it. So that's what that noise was.
You would think they'd have a better setup down there, but whatever. That's neither here nor there. Sirianni, he's talking about accountability, and it's great. And I love that he accepted responsibility in front of the team, showed great accountability. They're having a culture of accountability. It's all great. You do need that. But here's my problem. We started the show today talking about how all of this is great until adversity hits. Simply being accountable, but not having answers, to me, doesn't do anything for you. If I got up in front, when I used to own the law firm and I had to be a leader, if I got up and say, hey, yeah, that was on me. Sorry about that. Yeah, that one was on me. Sorry about that. Yep, that one's on me. Sorry about that. But you don't have any answers for how you correct things going forward, then accountability means nothing, doesn't it?
You have to have an answer for your mistakes. Otherwise, you're just taking ownership, which is good and great. But if you don't have a solution for that, it really serves no purpose at the end of the day.
So that's the one thing that it's a positive. But are they going to have more answers this year? Is Nick Sirianni going to have more answers this season. I want to continue this conversation coming up because I know we're not going to be asking Nick Sirianni to have as many answers from a scheme perspective on the offensive side of the football. We've never really asked him to have any answers on the defensive side. But when adversity hits, the culture will also need answers. You're going to have to bring people together. Is this team going to be able to do it? Because last year, we all saw what happened. But we'll continue to look at the schedule, where adversity could hit. And I want to get into more of the accountability that Sirianni is preaching for the culture of the 2024 Philadelphia Eagles. And we'll continue that fun conversation if you're stuck in a spacecraft for 6 months. Sirianni or Hurts? Whew. It's like pick your poison right there. Who would you rather be stuck with? But all that coming up next. This 12 o'clock hour on The Fanatic is brought to you by Service First Heating and Air Conditioning. Get 0% financing for 72 months and a $500 rebate when you purchase a complete heating and cooling system from Service First. Learn more now at servicefirsthvac.com. So, Andrew, before the break, we were talking about, it was nice that Nick Sirianni stepped up in front of his team, according to this article, at spring workouts, accepted a lot of the responsibility, took accountability. And then we played a clip of Sirianni talking about accountability, and they're trying to breed that culture. I said accountability's fine as long as you have answers. You can't just say, I was wrong, that was on me, I take responsibility. You have to have answers to fix those problems. And one of the things that the team did not have answers for last year was the blitz. And it comes out in this article from yesterday that after the regular season ended and before the playoff game against the Tampa Bay Bucks, Jalen Hurts picks up the phone and he calls Wink Martindale, who blitzed him more than anybody this season, to try to get answers. Here's my question for you. Yes, that is an indictment on Nick Sirianni that Jalen Hurts didn't feel comfortable with Nick Sirianni having the answers. But isn't it also an indictment not only on Brian Johnson, who was the offensive coordinator, but what about the greatest offensive line coach we've ever seen? Jeff Stoutland gets credit, as he should, for being the best offensive line coach we've ever had. He's developed so many Pro Bowlers in this city. He took Jordan Mailata from a guy who never played football to the levels he's at, and I don't think we've even come close to seeing Jordan Mailata's ceiling yet. Why couldn't he go to Jeff Stoutland? Why did Jalen Hurts have to call Wink Martindale? Jeff Stoutland also didn't have answers?
Not only is it an indictment on the offensive coaches that you mentioned, Bill, but also on the defensive side as well. You had a guy like Matt Patricia who has coached in a number of different destinations before. Maybe you ask him, hey, when teams are showing me this, how should I react to it? Or how do quarterbacks react to this in the past? He didn't do that. So you can look at it two ways. The first way is, well, good on Jalen for leaving no stone unturned and trying to better himself. But the other way, which is the way that I perceive it, is you're looking outside the organization for answers rather than, lean on some of the resources that you have inside that building, which lends itself to not having trust and confidence in the coaches that you have there. So I think that's sort of an indictment on the coaching staff as a whole.
And I've said this before. Yes, a majority of the blame should always go to the head coach when a season collapses the way that it did. I understood that. But part of the reason why I was defending Sirianni for wanting him to come back is because you can't put all of the blame on him. When they didn't have answers for the blitz, Jason Kelce was your center. We just talked about it. If you missed it, Nick Foles announced he's going to retire as a Philadelphia Eagle Monday, September 16th in their home opener against the Atlanta Falcons. He'll be honored. Definitely want to go there. And we were talking about whether or not Nick Foles' jersey number would be retired, and we didn't think it would. And then we spun off into, well, Jason Kelce should and all that. Kelce's the best center we've ever seen. He was calling blitz protections last year. He didn't have an answer for the blitz. Jalen Hurts didn't go to Jason Kelce and said, hey, Wink Martindale was blitzing me like crazy. What should I do? Jeff Stoutland, great offensive line coach, doesn't go to him and say, hey, they're blitzing like crazy. What should I do? Doesn't go to his buddy Brian Johnson, who he grew up with, who played for his father, didn't go to him and say, hey, they're blitzing me like crazy. What should we do? But there are some people, and I've seen it across social media, that read the article yesterday and said Nick Sirianni should have never been brought back because I can't believe Jalen Hurts would go above his head and call Wink Martindale. Then if under that rationale, you should be happy Kelce retired. You should not be happy Stoutland's back. You should be angry at every single offensive coach on that staff if you're going to look at that as an indictment on Sirianni and Sirianni alone.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Look, it can be taken multiple ways. And no one really knows whether or not he ran that through Nick Sirianni or who knew or who didn't know or who's making it a big deal. I think that, and you could also equate this not just in sports terms, but in your job or anything. If you see somebody at another profession or whatever that's doing something that you really admire and you're saying, hey, can you assess what I'm doing so that I can do it better, rather than people who are maybe too close to you and aren't going to be as objective or have an answer, well, I think that can be a good thing as well.
Let's get Ray's take on this, because I know he looked at that and thought, man, another indictment on Nick Sirianni. What is your position on what I'm saying? Why not go to your offensive line coach? Why not go to your friend and offensive coordinator?
Well, does that offensive coordinator still have a job here?
He does not.
Does the quarterback's coach still have a job here?
He also does not. Look at Ray, lawyering me.
I mean, you're saying right now these people that didn't have answers, that they deserve some consequence. The one on the offensive staff that didn't get the consequences, the guy that you just mentioned that's grown how many Pro Bowlers, that's been one of the best offensive line coaches in all of football? Yeah, maybe it wasn't his best showing. Yeah, maybe it wasn't Kelsey's best showing. We're having conversations about him being one of the, or if not the best ever at his position. Can you argue to me that Nick Sirianni has accomplished enough in the National Football League to say he deserves the same protections that a Jason Kelsey and a Jeff Stoutland do?
Yes.
You can?
I can. Because in 3 seasons with the Philadelphia Eagles, he has the best winning percentage of any coach to start his first 3 years. He's the only coach in franchise history to take all 3 of his teams to the playoffs. In his second season, you were a half away from winning a Super Bowl. There has been way more good surrounding Nick Sirianni and this team than there's been bad. Yes, last year was ugly the way it ended. I'm not absolving him of blame. He should be blamed for what occurred. The fact that Hurts had to pick up the phone and call Martindale, yeah, that's not a good look for Sirianni. But it's also not a good look for anyone else. And when you raise that question, yes, I do think Sirianni deserves the benefit of the doubt just as much as Jeff Stoutland does. Because in the 3 years I've seen Nick Sirianni, you've gone to the playoffs all 3 years, and you were 30 minutes away from being a Super Bowl champion.
And when Nick Sirianni has had his strongest control of the answers that this team has sought, what has happened to them?
What was that? One more time?
When he's had the strongest control of the answers, when you're looking for answers and you are looking at Nick Sirianni, when he has had his greatest control of this team, greatest control over the answers that they seek, what has happened to this team?
I understand what you're saying, and I'm with you on that. That's why when we talk about Brian Johnson lost his job, yes, Nick Sirianni changed his role. He became a CEO, because when he was more of a CEO-type coach is when this team had their most success. So that's why I loved the offseason moves. You kept Nick Sirianni, and you brought in a veteran, 5-year veteran, Kellen Moore, as an offensive coordinator. You brought in a 20-year defensive coordinator / head coach in Vic Fangio. I felt like that was the best path forward. The devil you know is a lot of times better than the devil you don't. If they fired Nick Sirianni and they decided this offseason to go at it with a brand new head coach, there is no guarantee that this team would have been better off than what they are under Nick Sirianni, which, as I've said, has been really damn good for 2.5 seasons. We only saw 6 bad games towards the end of last year. The way they bounced back in 2021 and go to the playoffs. The run they had in 2022, phenomenal. The 10-1 start, I know it was a struggle. But you also, I've gone through this before, the Super Bowl hangover, having to replace both coordinators. These are things that coaches have never had to deal with. There's only 2 coaches ever that had to deal with this type of change after going to a Super Bowl. One of them is Nick Sirianni. The other 2 are George Seifert and Bill Belichick. So the fact that we look at this guy and say, oh, he's a clown or he should have been fired, to me would have been a major overreaction.
And there's 2 coaches in history that have had the type of collapse that he's had, and one of them would be Nick Sirianni.
You could look at it that way too, Ray.
You could be a victim or a hero of history. History plays both ways on this one for him. Yeah, he's had to deal with circumstances. He's also been at the steering command of circumstances that hasn't happened to anyone else as well. I have to really accept at this point he's the head coach. Like, he is. So at this point, if I'm still trying to find reason to be upset with him being here, it's wrong for me. I'm going into this season with him as the head coach. Yesterday's article did not paint him in the picture that makes me feel all the warm and fuzzy. Oh, yeah, it's all going to work out for him. I like him better in this role. I like what they've done in the offseason. I think this is If you were going to keep him, this was the course forward. So good on you. You made that decision. I didn't agree with that decision. But if you were going to do it, you did it in the right way to keep him around. Us continuing to go back and forth about whether or not he's here, he's here. Congratulations, Bill. You got your coach. You got him here. I hope that by the end of this season, you're like, you know what, we have something very, very strong to point to that says Nick Sirianni has captained this thing and made this thing another contending season for the Eagles, and this is going to work out for the long run. I'll have my doubts about him until we get there.
And that brings us full circle to what we've been talking about today, which is what happens when adversity hits this team. Because I think the only way that Nick Sirianni can win over someone like you, and there's a lot of fans, you're not the only one, there's a lot of people who didn't want to see him back, the only thing he can do is guide this ship through adversity, because anything short of that I think is going to result in people thinking it was all Kellen Moore. But I want to continue that conversation coming up after this. But now it's time, because the summer games are still going on, it's time for our Westwood One Summer Games update.
Westwood One Sports presents this special update on the 2024 Summer Games, sponsored by Westin Hotel.
Welcome back into Middays. Bill Colarulo, Andrew DeCecco, Ray Dunn behind the glass. We got on this conversation about Nick Sirianni not having answers for the Blitz and Jalen Hurts having to call Martindale. And I said, yes, this is an indictment on Nick Sirianni, but doesn't it also tell us a lot about all of the other offensive coaches, including one of the greatest offensive line coaches we've ever seen in Jeff Stoutland? Because why didn't Jalen Hurts feel comfortable enough to go to Jeff Stoutland and say, hey, do you have any answers for the Blitz? And on our YouTube chat, Go-Go Bird says, well, because Wink was blitzing his linebackers and his D-backs, and Jeff only deals with the O-line and the D-line. I don't agree with that, Andrew. Do you?
He's also the run game coordinator.
He's got it,
and he has a lot more responsibility than I think he's given credit for.
And if he's going to be responsible, Jason Kelsey at the line was responsible for blitz protections. It doesn't matter if they're bringing a linebacker and dropping an edge rusher in the coverage or doing whatever. They got to be prepared for all of that stuff.
Every aspect of the offensive line he oversees.
We'll see. And I don't want to rehash the past. It just was something that obviously this team struggled with last year. And I saw a lot of people on social media who read this article saying this, how do you bring back a coach in Nick Sirianni where the quarterback felt his only way to get answers was to pick up the phone and call an opponent's defensive coordinator? And to me, that told me, yes, Nick Sirianni should be blamed a lot. But it also, as much as I gave credit to Jalen Hurts, and you did just now too, I gave him some credit on yesterday's show. I don't know how much I love that without talking to your head coach and your coaching staff. If he didn't go to Nick Sirianni and Brian Johnson and said, hey, listen, I'm thinking about reaching out to Martindale because I want to be a coffee bean. I want to, whatever other quotes he's got. Actually, I looked up some of his quotes, but we'll get into that in a second.
But you just said if he didn't ask. We don't
know if he asked. Because I think that would have been the right thing to do, would be to tell your head coach and your offensive coordinator what your plan was. So I think there's a lot of blame to go around, but we're trying to move on. And as I talk about moving on, everything's good right now, but will it continue to be good throughout the season once adversity hits? Because it's inevitable that adversity will hit. What we saw in 2022 is extremely, extremely unlikely, where they literally dominated all season long. Jalen gets hurt. That's really the only adversity you hit. You lose both games, he's out. He comes back, and then you had a dominating playoff season. Ray wants to jump in on me here.
No. You go ahead, finish your thought.
I can see Ray's nostrils flaring. His eyes are widening,
chomping at the bit over there.
I just mean like if we're at Jalen, you can't dial that phone number because it might upset the people that you suspect won't have answers. Like this is supposedly happened before the playoffs.
Chain of command, Ray. Chain of command.
Martindale's going to be out with the Giants. He's gone. He's not going to be a member of your division right now. You're going to check in on what they've done against you twice. With Todd Bowles coming up. If you don't think there's answers there, which I think Hurts probably was proven correct on that, because if he didn't think there were going to be answers for the playoff game and we watched the playoff game, there weren't any answers, he's trying to do anything. If anything, that's like, hey, competitor trying to get something to give him an edge in a playoff game that he's going into anticipating not having his top wide receiver and in an environment against the defense that he's proven not successful against that season for a multitude of reasons. I think part of that does come on him. We can absolutely put blame on him, but a lot of it, we've been looking at the offense and saying they're not on the same page. Maybe what they're designing isn't working, and they're not ready for the blitz. I think that's just a guy like, I need something here. You know how desperate you got to be to go, hey, man, the Giants defense really gave me trouble. You mind checking in with me about what you guys were doing?
I'm with you if this quote wasn't also in the article. Last year, multiple sources believe Hurts absolutely tuned out Sirianni at points last season, and that Hurts, as a leader, will need to improve on a habit of shutting people out when frustrated. So multiple sources are saying this is a habit of Jalen Hurts, where he's a team. Who else did Jalen Hurts shut out because of the frustration that set in? And again, I don't want this to be, I'm making excuses for Sirianni. He needs to be better. This article was an indictment on him. I am hoping he learned from last season. It sounds like he took a step in the right direction, accepting accountability, but he also needs answers as well. But the fact that Jalen Hurts shuts people out when frustrated, to me, is a major problem that he also needs to work on.
Yeah, I'm not taking him off the hook. I'm just saying if you're upset with him placing a phone call where I think he's proven correct that he wasn't going to get any answers, I don't think that's not where I'm taking issue with him.
Yeah, but doesn't that kind of further this point where it's Jalen Hurts gets frustrated, so he shuts people out. So much so that he's going to pick up the phone and call an opposing coach because he's going to shut out everyone on his own coaching staff.
At 10-1, it seemed like he saw the flaws in the team. The flaws had been exposed to him then over a long stretch without any real change that he was looking for to the offense. He's like, all right, well, I'm not getting answers here. I might as well see what they're doing against me. Let me see what's going on with Wink-Martindale. It's an odd thing to do, but it was an odd situation between the two of them all season long. I think it kind of just fits with it's par for the course for a season that was unprecedented in the way it ended, to have an unprecedented move by someone involved with it to try and salvage it.
Andrew, where are you at on all this?
Well, I should add that this is per my guy Zach Berman. The Eagles' offensive coaches also spoke to Martindale as part of their self-scouting process. So, to Ray's point, it doesn't seem like it's that out of the ordinary.
Well, I would be agreeing, saying maybe it's not that out of the ordinary, but Martindale was quoted in this article as saying he's been a coach for 40 years and this has never happened before. He said it's never happened. Let me see if I could find that quote.
I mean, you got the gist of it right there. It's never happened.
Yeah, I know. I've been doing.
I mean, you nailed it right there.
It up. Yeah.
It sums it up. It never happened.
Yes, I've been doing this for 40 years, and it's the first time I've had an opposing quarterback call me up. I thought it was pretty cool that the guy called. It shows you what kind of pro he really is. He's just looking at every angle that he can go to get better. So you could take it two ways. Yesterday, I was saying, hey, look, it shows Jalen Hurts is trying to improve. I just am hoping, and we don't know the answer, Andrew pointed that out, that he would have talked to his coaches first and said, hey, I'm planning on doing this. But I don't want to keep living in the past. I want to look towards the future because my man Andrew DeCecco has been down there at training camp every single day. And I want to ask him about another article that came out where they listed the most unstoppable players of the 2024 NFL training camp period. Not just Eagles. Most unstoppable players across the NFL, and there are two Eagles who made this list. I want to ask Andrew how accurate it is. We'll get into that coming up next. Welcome back into middays, 1 o'clock here on 97.5 The Fanatic. Bill Colarulo along with Andrew DeCecco, Ray Dunn behind the glass. If you're just tuning in, talking about a lot today, but some big news coming out of the Eagles camp. Nick Foles has announced he will retire as a Philadelphia Eagle. They're going to honor him. The home opener, September 16th. That's a Monday night game, right? Atlanta?
Yeah, it is.
Monday night, September 16th against the Atlanta Falcons. The only Super Bowl MVP in Philadelphia Eagles franchise history.
How's everyone doing?
We're doing just fine, Nick, thanks to you bringing that Super Bowl trophy. But we did talk a little bit earlier, should his number be retired or not? It's an interesting question. We're doing it on our Instagram right now. Dylan's going around asking everybody if his number should be retired. As great as that run was, I just don't think it should be retired in light of the fact he wasn't here long enough. He didn't start in enough games for me to justify it. I know he's the only Super Bowl MVP ever in Eagles franchise history. I don't think he did enough. Ray, what's your position on that?
That statue is wonderful out there. It's a wonderful way to honor him.
Dougie P's in that statue too, believe it or not.
It's a wonderful way to honor them. And that's my statement on the jersey retirement. I love the statue. Keep the statue. That's
I'm with
all I
you.
got.
Yeah, keep the statue. But you think now, Andrew's been thinking about this for a while.
Number of retirements are reserved for legends, and Nick Foles accomplished what no Eagles quarterback has done before, was the MVP in that game, outdueled arguably the greatest quarterback of all time. I think that he deserves his number being retired.
Yeah, I don't know. It'll be an interesting one. 62 definitely should be retired, Jason Kelce. I think if you're going to retire Kelce, you got to go with Fletch as well, but we'll find all that out. In other news, big win for the Fighting Phils last night. If you didn't stay up, you missed a good one. Kyle Schwarber, unbelievable last night. 4 for 4, 3 home runs, 7 RBIs. The most RBIs in a game by a Philly since Carlos Ruiz did it in extra innings against the Braves way back in May of 2012. And the last time a Philadelphia Philly had 3 home runs and 7 RBIs in a game, Jason Worth, May of 2008. It's a good omen, Ray. 2008, baby.
Something good happened that year. I do remember that now.
Something very good happened that season. But if you didn't stay awake last night, in addition to missing a good game, 9-4 win, something very interesting happened in the 8th inning. 8th inning, Michael Groves on the mound for the Dodgers. He decides, Matt Strom's on the mound, and he decides, I'm going to have Casty's back. And he retaliates, hitting Gavin Lux. You don't see a lot of retaliating in Major League Baseball anymore. One of the best retaliators of all time sitting outside the studio right now, my man Ricky Bowe, who said, Barry Bonds we're throwing at? No. Everybody else, go to the side because I'm Ricky Bowe and I'm throwing at Barry Bonds. I'm not afraid of anybody. Ricky Bowe.
Except Silvana.
Except for Silvana.
He's kind of afraid of Silvana.
But don't mess with Ricky Bowe. Everybody knows that. But it was interesting to see Matt Strom throw at Gavin Lux last night in retaliation. So we threw out the question to start the show. How do you feel about retaliating in Major League Baseball? Ray doesn't like it because he says don't give a guy an opportunity to get on base. Me and Andrew are of the mindset you protect each other. I don't like to see players get thrown at because they celebrate too much. I think that's ridiculous. Let these guys celebrate. Let's bring some personality to the game. I think you're seeing more and more of that. That'll help Major League Baseball market their stars, something they do terribly. They don't market their superstars. Let them have a personality on the field. But I'm okay with protecting each other. If someone slides in the second and tries to take out your second baseman or shortstop and does it in a way that's not within the rules, maybe you throw at that guy. Somebody charges your catcher, maybe you throw at that guy. But do it in a way that's safe. I'm not suggesting you throw at their heads, Andrew, you know?
Right, exactly. Like, I am all for it. I like what it symbolizes. But I'm not suggesting you're throwing at someone's head or you're throwing it at someone's knee. within the a respectable I think if you peg somebody in their midsection or whatever to send a message, that kind of brings the team together, and sometimes you can use that as momentum to move forward, and it builds a lot of cohesiveness.
Yeah, Andrew's saying don't hit him in the head, just break the ribs, right? That's what Andrew's saying.
Well, yeah, I mean, like the head, no, the head's off limits, the knee's off limits, but if you're going to hit somebody, you got to hit them somewhere.
But we put that Twitter poll up, Ray, and I'm curious if the numbers have changed at all, but I'm going to remind you, before he reads the Twitter results, we're in Philly. So that should tell you where this Twitter poll is.
The numbers have not changed at all. It's still 93% of people loving it in terms of what's your position on retaliating baseball. 7% of people hate it. So
7%. 93% of people absolutely love it. This is Philadelphia. If I have to remind you again, I think if this poll was done in the Midwest, it would probably be a lot closer to hating it and getting it out of the game. But that's why we love this city. That is why we love this city. We're also talking about another fun question we threw out today was, not that this is a fun article, because there is 2 astronauts from NASA who are stuck in outer space right now. They thought they were going up for a week. And instead, they're going to be there for another 6 months because they can't get them down. Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams, we wish them the best. Hopefully they can get home. But it sparked the question, now that we know more about Nick Sirianni's personality and Jalen Hurts' personality, if you were stuck in a spaceship for 6 months, would you rather be there with Nick Sirianni or Jalen Hurts? I'm going with Jalen Hurts. As much as I've defended Sirianni on this show, I was defending him before the break. I don't know if I could handle 6 months of constant conversation about core values and his high school and college days and constant competition in every single thing we did in a small, confined space, man. I'm going with Jalen.
I'm going with Nick Sirianni just for the entertainment value, right? Talking about the core values. I want to hear about the Mount Union stories. I think that would help pass the time. And maybe you get to kind of pick his brain and see what his football acumen looks like.
Ray?
Yeah, I'm going Hurts. I like some peace and quiet. I also would be interested to see, I think we know exactly what Sirianni is. Hurts is pretty guarded at the podium and talking to the media. I would be interested to see if within 6 months, maybe I could crack him. Maybe at some point, it's this Ray guy's not so bad. We're going to get past the main thing's the main thing. We'll get past the standard is the standard. I would be interested to see, if we had to develop a routine up there, if I was reminded consistently, the standard is the standard. When did getting back to earth not become the main thing? What are we going to get with some of these things?
Day by day.
Yeah, day by day.
So I found the list of some of his best. Keep the main thing the main thing. I had a purpose before everybody had an opinion. I like that one. The rent is due every day. 10% of your life is what happens to you. 90% is how you respond. You either win or you learn. We have a standard for ourselves, and it only rises. What else we got? This was one of my favorites. I remember this one. I didn't walk through all that fire just to smell the smoke. That could be a good one up there.
I mean, there's a lot that we could probably sit up there and go back and forth with.
I was born for the storm, I think he said one time.
Love Jalen Hurts' sound bites. Ray's going to put together a nice drop board of all the Jalen Hurts conversations. But I think we got some text on this, on who people would rather be stuck in space with, Hurts or Sirianni.
Yeah, we got Tal from South Philly checking in. If I'm stuck in space, I definitely choose Nick Sirianni. Love Jalen and all, but that guy would definitely bore me. I'd fall asleep on him. 5 quotes in. Sirianni at least keeps the energy up for those 6 months.
I think you'd say that for the first couple of days, maybe even the first week. 6 months, I think you'd be ready to throw Sirianni off the space shuttle. What else we got?
Mike from West Oak Lane checking in. Why aren't you guys acting like Jalen Hurts acts like that in his private life? I think it's obvious. Him saying cliches is definitely an act, as opposed to Sirianni, who I definitely think acts that way all the time. That to say, I'd rather be stuck with Jalen than Sirianni for sure.
I do think that's how Jalen is. I think Jalen's probably at home, and he's probably saying, what do you want for dinner? Oh, well, let's keep the main thing the main thing.
See, I don't think he's
You don't think he's like that?
I don't. You see the clips that surface on social media, and you don't get to that level. You don't get, you don't endear yourself to teammates by being reserved and closed off. I think you see him be able to let his personality show a little bit in some of those clips, talking to Saquon before practice or even after games when he's talking to the team. I think it would be mildly interesting to see how he would conduct himself in that type of setting, but not nearly as interesting as how Nick Sirianni would be in that.
Andrew, I love how analytical Andrew is. Like, this is a real thing that's going to happen.
Everything I do, I take it very seriously.
I'd love to see how he would react in that setting of going to outer space for 6 months. But as we're talking about Jalen Hurts, I said before the break, there was an article written by Cody Benjamin on CBS Sports, and they said the most unstoppable players of 2024 NFL training camps. And this was all around the NFL, not just Eagles. And they list about 8 different players. 2 of them are Philadelphia Eagles players. One of them is Jalen Hurts. So not only are we hearing it here locally how good Jalen Hurts has been in training camp, nationally they're hearing it as well. And Andrew, you've been down there. You've seen it with your own 2 eyes. He's looked that good. I'll take it with a grain of salt. It's practice, but he has looked that good.
Yeah, he's been tremendous. And Ty and I were actually talking yesterday in the lobby area. Maybe he's just good. Every practice report saying that he's good. Well, maybe this is just a good quarterback, and this is a byproduct of him making that natural evolution towards being a preeminent quarterback in the NFL. He's throwing the ball with accuracy, with touch. He's more at command with the offense. He seems a lot more comfortable. And it seems like he's involving other receivers rather than locking in on AJ or Devontae. He's utilizing the middle of the field more. So he's definitely had probably his best camp. But, again, we have to see what that means, if he's able to carry that over into the regular season.
I had my concerns when it was announced that Jalen Hurts was going to be also responsible now for making blitz protections at the line of scrimmage along with Cam Jurgens, something he's never had to do before. But I'm starting to come around that maybe it could be a positive because it does force Jalen Hurts now to be aware of everything at that line of scrimmage. I hope he can handle it all while learning a new offense and new terminology with a new play caller in Kellen Moore. But if he looks this good in practice, then clearly he's probably picking it up rather quickly. But it's a whole different animal come week 1 when they do start throwing blitzes at him. And he's responsible with Cam Jurgens and trying to figure out how to adjust the protections at the line of scrimmage. But if he can add that part to his game, not comparing him to the Peyton Mannings and the Tom Bradys of the world, but that's what they were able to do. That's what made Peyton Manning and Tom Brady so good, is they would come to the line of scrimmage, and Tom Brady recently was talking about this very thing. He would know that before the ball was even snapped if the play was going to work, because he knew where all of his protections had to be. He knew where the ball needed to go, and he was able to make the appropriate adjustments at the line of scrimmage. If Jalen Hurts can elevate his game to that level, sky's the limit for this team.
Yeah, and I think if Jalen Hurts has proven anything during his time with the Philadelphia Eagles, it's that he's adaptable. Having all those different offensive coordinators, having a lot of different moving parts, looking at it in terms of the spring practice when he was very uneven throughout the whole OTAs and minicamp, he took those 6 weeks to master the offense, at least coming back and showing a much more confident, just executing the offense in the vision that Kellen Moore really wants. And I think that really speaks to his football acumen. And he's talking about ownership. He wants the offense to become his. He wants to take ownership of the, handling the protection at the line of scrimmage. And I think he's going to, because he's proven that he can handle a lot of different things. And when you have a quarterback who wants more responsibility, who's always looking to take that next step, I think you always can feel comfortable knowing that he's going to put in the extra work.
He's definitely a hard worker. No one's ever questioned that. There has been questions about his leadership style, and the article that dropped yesterday that we talked about a lot throughout the shows, not only us yesterday, but the morning show as well as the best show ever. It did talk about in there that at a certain point, Nick Sirianni and Brian Johnson had to sit down with Jalen Hurts to talk to him about being a more vocal leader, because things obviously didn't look right even when they were 10-1. You've been down there. We just talked about how he looks on the field. You just talked about his work ethic, how he's willing to put in the time to learn this new offense and all these new responsibilities. What have you seen from him as far as leadership? Has he been more vocal on the practice fields with his teammates?
I don't know if looking at someone in terms of being vocal or not is very indicative of what kind of leader they are. I look and see if he's communicating with players when they come off the field, if he's walking guys through how routes are supposed to look, the timing, how he wants things to be. He's doing all those things. What he does behind closed doors, we're not privy to, but I have to think that he's a lot more vocal in those type of settings. But I've seen some notable growth in him in that area.
Yeah, and again, going back to that article yesterday, one team source described it as Hurst trying to play hero ball, trying to prove he was worth $250 million on every throw. I'm sure that was a lot to put on a guy's plate that young. He just celebrated his birthday yesterday, actually. But that young, all that money, hopefully he's more loose this season going in. You don't have all that contract to worry about. It's just, look, it says in this article there's a lot to digest, and we went over it yesterday. I just do worry that, are you asking too much of Jalen? Because to your point about how you don't have to be vocal to necessarily be a good leader, it is something that they specifically have spoken to him about. They wanted him to be more vocal. They wanted him to be more open with his teammates. When I look at Jalen Hurts, because I am still very high on Jalen, I do expect him to have a very good season. I just worry that, are you throwing too much at this young man? Because he still is a very young man. I know people love to cite the contract and say $250 million, he should do whatever you're asking. You're asking him to be a different type of leader. You're asking him to be more vocal. You're asking him to pick up blitz protections and changing the line's responsibility at the line of scrimmage. We heard from Kellen Moore this week about how he's also going to have the freedom to make changes to the route designs of a certain play at the line. You're also asking him to learn this new offense. There's all these things you're throwing at Jalen Hurts. Is he going to be capable to hit the ground running? Because, again, bringing it back to what we talked about to start the show, everything's fine now, but when adversity hits, how do they handle it? And there's a very strong possibility when you have to handle all these things I'm saying, that they don't come out of the gate strong, that they do have to find their footing early. And if that happens and adversity hits early in the season, are they going to be able to overcome it?
Well, you and I share the same sentiment in that I do think that they may get out of the gate slow to start the season for a multitude of reasons. There's a lot of moving parts going on with the Eagles, and I think that needs to be taken into account a little bit more than it really has. I don't think a lot of folks appreciate that. But can he process all those different things that are being thrown at him? Well, I think he's shown that he can respond to coaching changes and things like that, and he's willing to look internally because obviously he talks about holding himself to a high standard. Well, now is the opportunity to really rectify a lot of your shortcomings, and I think that season probably humbled him to a degree, and you're able to take a step back, look at that, assess what you did wrong, and what you need to do to be a better leader and orchestrate the offense in the way that needs to be. I think he's going to do it, and I think that he doesn't want to undergo a season like he just did and have to answer all those questions and just that pressure. I just think he wants to alleviate all that, and that's why I think that the work he put in the offseason is going to kind of eliminate all this.
He's definitely a hard worker, and I hope you're right. I hope all of this ends up being a positive for everybody. We talked about how this article could be a positive for Nick Sirianni as well, because he took a step back, he evaluated himself, he's now changing to be more involved with just culture, camaraderie, all those types of things. Hopefully Jalen Hurts has had time to reflect as well, because there's some things that Jalen didn't do great last year. Tuning people out, wasn't necessarily the best leader. We've had sources saying playing hero ball, all those good things. But right now, as we sit here on August 8th of 2024, it's hard not to have positive vibes about this team. They don't have any of the other issues outside of this article that drops yesterday. And again, for those of you wondering why it dropped yesterday, Tim McManus, Jeremy Fowler. McManus was on Best Show Ever. I had Jeremy Fowler here with me and Ray on middays. The reason the article drops when it does is because they got to put time into their sources. They have to do their research. They corroborate things, and they wanted an opportunity to talk to some of these players and sources to confirm everything that's in the article before they drop it. It just so happens it drops yesterday. And I know a lot of fans I'm over it. I'm over it too. We're all over what happened last season. but it's nice that we got answers to it. But outside of that article, everything's been pretty positive with this team right now. All of the vibes seem pretty good, and there's a reason why they're so high up in the power rankings that we talked about yesterday. And I haven't had a chance to talk to Andrew about those, so I want to get into that with him coming up next. But I also want to take a look when I say there's all these great vibes surrounding the Eagles. You can't say the same about some of the NFC rivals of the Philadelphia Eagles. So we'll take a look at an update on what's going on with two star wide receivers in the NFC coming up next. This 1 o'clock hour on The Fanatic is brought to you by Ferguson HVAC Lyon Conklin. Attention HVAC contractors. For equipment, parts, and supplies for every heating and cooling job, visit one of Ferguson's counter locations in Bensalem, King of Prussia, Pennsauken, or Westchester. Westchester. There used to be training camp up at Westchester before it went to Lehigh.
I live right around Westchester. It would have been very convenient for me to get to and from.
Those were the good old days when you could actually go down and watch practice without a media credential. Not everyone's as lucky as you, Andrew, to have media credentials to get to see all these training camp practices. Fans only got to see one, and it's already over. But they may get to see some players tomorrow night on TV, or if you want to drive down to Baltimore for the first preseason game. We'll be doing our pregame show right here on The Fanatic at 6 o'clock tomorrow night, right after the best show ever. You'll have Andrew Salciunas, me, Andrew DeCecco will be tuning in, or checking in, I should say, along with Tim McManus. So we'll talk a lot about that tomorrow as we get ready for the first time you'll see the Philadelphia Eagles in 2024 take on an opponent. But I mentioned to you, Andrew, as we were talking about the most unstoppable players of the 2024 NFL training camp, that Jalen Hurts made the list. And this was all NFL players, not just Eagles. There was another Jalen from the Eagles that made the list. May not be a tough one to guess.
Yeah, Jalen Carter has been tremendous throughout training camp. He's even lined up on the edge. But to kind of put in perspective how powerful of a human being he is, it's must-watch reps when he's going against Mekhi Becton. So you're seeing the 6'7", 360-pound Mekhi Becton, who throws people aside, go against Jalen Carter. And Jalen Carter tossed him aside like it was nothing. His hands he uses heavy, violent hands. He's powerful off the snap and really unblockable in any of the one-on-one drills. I think he's going to, and you and I have talked about this, Bill, I think he's going to be an all-pro this season if he stays healthy.
And interestingly, yesterday they had him lined up at edge rusher a little bit, I heard.
Yeah, a little bit. It's something that I think they're experimenting with when you see Vic Fangio shuffling guys in and out of lineups. You're putting different players at spots to see where they're really able to thrive. So I think that's something you'll see in the regular season, although I wouldn't be so quick to think that that's going to be a long-term solution.
Maybe just throwing out some different packages. But that pass rush is going to be interesting this year because we keep going back to how bad the defense was last season. And a major difference from 22 to 23 was the pressure on the quarterback, getting to the quarterback. 70 sacks down to 43, if I'm not mistaken.
You got it.
Massive drop-off there. Jalen Carter will certainly help. Bryce Huff will certainly help. But we will see. That may be a big question as to how good this defense is how good that pass rush can be.
Don't sleep on Nolan Smith either. He looks ready.
Yeah, Nolan Smith is an interesting guy because if he turns out to be a stud, and Bryce Huff, there's so many ifs. But if Nolan Smith turns out to be the guy you thought you were getting when you took him in the first round, this defense can be really good. That pass rush can be really effective.
That's going to answer a lot of questions because obviously a good pass rush is going to help a secondary, which is really young and inexperienced. If they're able to get some production out of a couple of key players who are really unknown variables right now in Bryce Huff and Nolan Smith, I think they're going to be just fine.
I hope I'm wrong on this. I'm starting to not be high on Nolan Smith. And I know he's looked good in training camp. And I was all for the draft pick when they made it. And you should never judge a rookie for his entire career. If we would have done that to Brandon Graham, we would have got rid of him a long time before he became a legend in this town. Nolan Smith looked lost to me last year. And if you remember, all the reports were how good he looked in training camp last season.
But then he had the shoulder injury in August, and I think that may have played a part into it. And he also was very undersized. He's noticeably bigger right now. He added 7 pounds. He's 245, but you see it. You see the impact that it's impact in his pass rush handling these offensive tackles. He has a lot more variety in his moves, and I just think he's a lot more explosive than he was last season.
I hope you're right. And I hope that I'm wrong. But for whatever reason, what I saw last season it's making me nervous about Nolan Smith because it wasn't even as if he had a bad rookie season. He looked lost to me. It looked like he did not belong out there on an NFL field Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully he comes back in year 2 and it's a completely different situation. I think you need him to be. I think if he turns out to be a bust, what do you really have at edge rusher outside of Bryce Huff? And then Josh Sweat, we know, can't play the amount of snaps he played last year. So a lot of this does rest on Nolan Smith being good. If Nolan Smith struggles again, you're going to have issues because Bryce Huff is going to have to play career high in snaps. Josh Sweat, we already saw, struggles when he plays a lot of snaps. Brandon Graham in his swan song season, he's not playing a lot of reps. If Nolan Smith's not the guy, who's going to be able to step up and put pressure on the quarterback?
And Jalix Hunt is going to be more of a situational player. He's developing pretty quickly, and I think the Eagles have to be encouraged with that. But to expect him to be able to step into a rotation and give you 15% of the snaps, I just don't think that's a viable solution. But I think the key to this whole equation is Nolan Smith, because he's going to have to take a big leap forward. And we know with Josh Sweat last season playing 828 snaps, you started to see him wear down, and he was very ineffective and lost that burst down the stretch.
So we'll see how all that plays out. I'm curious to see how many of those guys play in the preseason game on Friday, because I don't want the starters to play, but a guy like Nolan Smith is someone who should get out there. But, Andrew, I mentioned that we talked about the power rankings yesterday. The NFL.com released their first set of power rankings for the preseason. Philadelphia Eagles came in at number 5, and I want your take on this. Ahead of them, they have the Lions at 4, the Ravens at 3, the Niners at 2, the Chiefs at 1. I don't have any problems with the top 3. I'm not so sure that the Lions should be ranked above the Eagles, but I understand why based off of how last season went.
Oh, I do. I think the Lions should be above the Eagles. I don't know that I would put the Ravens above the Eagles.
Interesting. You don't think the Ravens are up there?
I think they're in the upper echelon of the NFL hierarchy, but I don't know that they're above the Eagles in that. They may be 6 or 7, but I don't have an issue with the Lions being above the Eagles. I think they have a lot more. Well, they have consistency there, with Ben Johnson returning on the offense, and Jared Goff is the perfect quarterback to execute that offense. I think that they have a multitude of weapons. He just has to kind of keep it on schedule and not turn the football over, and they're going to be okay. And then I really like what they've done defensively, adding a lot of key pieces to their secondary through the draft. And they already had building blocks in linebacker Jack Campbell, and Jahmyr Gibbs is at running back, is going to have a monster season, I think.
Well, we'll see how it all plays out. It's only power rankings in the preseason. Obviously, that's on paper. We got to see it on the field. But let's jump over to the other field, the baseball field. But before we do, we threw out that fun question about if you were stuck on the space shuttle, would you rather be stuck with Sirianni or Hurts? That was a question that came up earlier. We had some fun with it, and we've got some text on it. We have a text, Ray?
Yeah, Christian from Widener checking in. I would rather be with Hurts for the 6 months with his attitude and his grind. I feel like we'd get along. Now, Sirianni, I feel like he would probably go psycho and within a week beat me. I don't think that Christian's quite understanding what it's like to be on the space station, but
Sirianni would eat him.
What about Sirianni speaks that to you? Christian, you can follow up with that one, but that's not why I wouldn't want to be with Sirianni.
Sirianni would go crazy and eat me.
He's calling him a cannibal now? What are we doing?
I've had a lot to say about Sirianni. I think I've stopped short a number of times.
Yeah, I don't think you've gone that far with it. But I thought throwing that question out, we would get some unique answers, but I didn't think that would be one.
Even Ray hasn't taken it that far.
Yeah, seriously. I'm not a fan of the guy, but my goodness.
Man, well, let's jump over to the baseball team because big series win last night. It really was. And what I want to throw out to both of you and talk about for the rest of the show here, now that we've seen the Philadelphia Phillies play 6 games against the LA Dodgers, and they won 5 of them, are the Philadelphia Phillies a better team than the LA Dodgers? Because the odds would still tell you the Dodgers are favored to win the World Series. But we've seen it now on the field for 6 games. The Phillies are a better baseball team than LA, especially when Ranger comes back, which hopefully happens soon, and you get him healthy. I think their lineup, as tough as the Dodgers lineup is, the Phillies have done this with Realmuto not hitting. Did Realmuto play in the first series? No.
No, because remember it was he was trying to target coming back around that time,
Yeah.
but he ended up back after the All-Star break.
So they basically did this without Real Muto because he didn't play in the first series and he didn't really do much for you at all in this series. Harper didn't play well. You're not getting much from Trey Turner. I just look at this team. Why are the Dodgers still better odds to win the World Series than our fighting Phils?
There's probably some recency bias there, I would think. But I think the Phillies have – sometimes in sports, when you go through a low, you need a reminder. And I think the Phillies have shown over the past 2 games that what they're capable of when they're firing on all cylinders. And they're not even firing on all cylinders. Bryce Harper, I think, is going to – it's only a matter of time before he starts to heat up. And I think once that happens, you're going to see everything start to propel forward.
I would say the one thing that they're probably banking on here, if you continue to have the conversation about the Dodgers being better than the Phillies, is, yeah, the Phillies are without JT, Dodgers still without Mookie Betts.
It's a good point.
And what he could bring to that lineup. Because, you're sweating at the beginning of that lineup anyways. All right. Ohtani as a leadoff guy, we talk a lot about Schwarber and the fear that he instills with the first pitch of the game.
Yeah, Ohtani makes you nervous, too.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Every time he steps up to the plate, I was breaking out into a good sweat. I haven't gone to the gym all week because I've just been sweating watching this team every time Ohtani comes up to the plate. Bringing back Betts, if their pitching gets a little healthier, I can see where someone may think that. I just know this team's done it in the postseason. Like, I've seen the Phillies do it, yeah.
The Phillies have done it in the postseason. And what's crazy is our own Dylan McKinnon put out a really good tweet today, or maybe last night after the game. You look at the Philadelphia Phillies versus National League teams who are currently over 500. Remember that all that chatter, they can't beat good teams?
Right.
They're 5-1 against the Dodgers, 3-0 against the Brewers, 5-1 against the Padres, 4-2 against the Cardinals, 5-2 against the Giants, 4-2 against the Mets, 2-1 against the Diamondbacks. We'll see what happens over the next 4. The only team they have a losing record to that has a 500 or better record in the National League, they're 2-4 against the Atlanta Braves. But yet the Braves don't scare me anymore.
Braves right now, they did just get a 3-run shot from Riley, but they're down 8-3 early to the Brewers. Another Morton start where he's getting lit up early.
Braves don't scare me. But I also mentioned when we were talking about the good vibes for the Eagles, there's some stuff going on in the NFL with wide receivers. Still, no news on CeeDee Lamb or Brandon Ayuk. CeeDee Lamb still has yet to report, if I'm not mistaken. And Brandon Ayuk, although we thought he was going to get traded, we're still no news. I thought we'd be breaking news here. If it wasn't today, I thought it would have been yesterday that we were going to get a Brandon Ayuk trade. We got to continue to monitor it. I hope he doesn't stay in San Francisco. But
starting to look that way.
He can't. He hasn't practiced yet, right?
When I was out in Pittsburgh, I was listening, because I like listening to sports talk radio, believe it or not. I was listening to them, and the way that, I don't know, it was some caller calling in just pining for the Steelers. Get him. Anything you could do to get Ayuk here. I can't wait to see what happens, and hopefully he ends up in the AFC. That's all I want.
Yeah, that's what I want too. Send him to the AFC. So I want to, get on the text board. I want to ask the question, though, about the Phillies and the Dodgers, because we were just talking about how I think they're better than the Dodgers. Ray's point, hey, Mookie Betts isn't here yet. What do you think? Send us a text, 610-632-0975. Do you think now, after you've seen the season series is over. Phillies won at 5-1. Are the Phillies the better baseball team? I think that they are. Again, send us a text, 610-632-0975. Coming up, we'll continue that conversation, and I want to play a quick clip, Ray, when we get back, of Jason Stark from yesterday's Best Show Ever, easing some concerns about what just happened, to Andrew's point about recency bias, what just happened with the Philadelphia Phillies and why you shouldn't be too concerned. Jason Stark always gives you that objective positivity. So I'll play that for you coming up next.
FanFest.com.
Yeah, this is a tradition around here. I know this seems incredible. This is only the fourth season where the Phillies were in first place by 10 games or more. And look at those other three seasons. The 1976 team, they started something like 60-20. They were up 15 games in July. That lead got all the way down to 3. The 93 Phillies, led by double digits in June. What happened to that lead? Also got down to 3 games. Both those teams survived, but people had to live through that. The only other team was the 2011 team, which was, they looked like they were headed for like 120 wins or whatever, but they didn't get their lead to double figures until September. And what happened that September? They lost 8 games in a row. I know that happened after they clinched, but it did wind up having an impact on how that season ended because it really led to them getting matched up with the Cardinals, which didn't work out well. So I hope I summed it up. That's the tradition in our town, and it's really enjoyable, isn't it?
So that was Jason Stark on the best show ever yesterday. Joins them every Wednesday, does a great job. Hall of Famer Jason Stark. But help put some things in perspective for us there. Because every time the Philadelphia Phillies had a 10-game lead in the division, it's dwindled. This is the reality of a 162-game season, Andrew. And the beautiful part of all of this is, as much as the Phillies struggled over the last month or so, it didn't get down to 3 games, like Jason Stark told us it has in the past. They're now sitting there 7.5 games up on the Atlanta Braves, who are losing again right now. We can feel good again about our baseball team, I think.
I think so. He put a lot of things into perspective. The Phillies have been able to keep that gap pretty sizable for the duration of the season. So I really don't think there should be cause for concern. They're not a team that's really going to take it down to the wire, if you will.
And not only are they 7.5 up on the Braves, they're now 2.5 up on the Dodgers in the National League. A tough stretch, though. They're coming up towards the end of that tough stretch. It finishes with 4 games in Arizona. Are they a better baseball team than the LA Dodgers right now, in your opinion?
Yes.
Ray, better baseball team than the Dodgers right now?
That's why I play the games. I mean, they're 5-1 against them. That to me is they're good. You can't really give me anything other than that. Both teams have had their trouble with health. Obviously, missing Betts is a big deal.
When's he supposed to come back?
They didn't have JT for that, for the one.
And they haven't had him playing at a level. And if you looked at where they were coming out from the last couple weeks into this series, a lot of people would say, wow, this Phillies team was really scuffling. You get your mojo back against the Dodgers. That says something about who you are.
Most definitely.
So I think right now, yeah, they are. I mean, you are what your record tells you are right now. They're the best team in the National League, and I think they're back to being the best team in baseball after this win 2 or 3.
They are, but yet the odds makers still seem to think the Dodgers got a better shot at winning the World Series.
Again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, and I apologize, Bill, to you especially, because I think this is going to be a common refrain you hear from me through October. To me, it's all about the war of attrition with arms. It's been a problem for the Dodgers. It's been a problem for the Braves. These teams have great regular seasons. How healthy are your arms at the end?
So speaking of that, then, Ranger Suarez probably coming back for that home series against the Braves. Well, no, they would come back after the home series, and they go to Atlanta. They got Washington and Miami at home. Miami for 2 games, Washington for 3, if I'm not mistaken, Ray. So, Ranger, you think he pitches in one of those series?
I'd like to think so. They're thinking they're getting back in the homestand. It'd be a nice way to get him, kind of acclimated back against those 2 lineups, especially the Marlins. Yeah,
Alex Coffey had tweeted out yesterday that Ranger Suarez's bullpen session went very good. To me, that's the key for the future. But, Andrew, big thank you to you. Make sure you tune in. Andrew DeCecco tonight, 6 o'clock, Birds Insider. Keep it here for the best show ever. You'll get me and Ray along with Amy Fadul tomorrow.